welcome everybody to the December 19th Town of Los Gatos Council meeting. It's going to be a long agenda. I'm expecting if you're the last agenda item, you may be here certainly well into the 11th hour. I have some people wishing not. We'll see how we can get through efficiently, but just to set some expectations, could be a long night. So could I have a roll call, please?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Councilmember Mariko Sayak.
Here.
Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Vice Mayor Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Rob Rennie.
Here. Okay, now at this time, let me invite up our pledge leader, who is Noel Hale. Come around this side. Come join me. So I have here a little information about Hale. He is a 7th grader at Fisher Middle School, and it says he is a polymath in many disciplines. I'm not sure what that means. Do you know what that means?
Yes, I am very good in history, math, science, and I like also PE.
Okay, that sounds really good. It also says you're a straight A student in all things achievable in academic circles. Did your mom write this by any chance? Yeah, it seems like she's pretty proud of you, I think. It also says here you speak 3 languages, which amazes me: English, French, and Japanese, and you're currently learning Spanish. That is amazing.
My Spanish teacher is a great teacher, and she's really good.
And I bet she thinks you're a good student, too. You're also good in coding software outside your current middle school curriculum. That's good to do. Very important in today's world, I think. Everybody needs to be a coder, right? And you're a natural in sports with soccer. I like to play soccer, swimming, tennis, and basketball. You are a really all-around person. Can you also do the pledge? Yes. Okay, well, let me turn it over to you. The flag is this way.
Okay. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let me trade you. This is a gift for you, so let me shake your hand. Thank you. And then Councilmember Jensen and Councilmember Leonardis. So everybody give Noah a round of applause. Thank you. So I know we have a long agenda, but we get to do fun things first. First, we have a commendation for the restaurant called Hana. Is Hana here? So come on up and join me here. So I'll go ahead and read the commendation. So it says, Hana is a modern Vietnamese bistro owned and operated by executive chef Hana Pham. Opened its doors in Los Gatos in 2013. It's been a favorite of mine and my wife since it opened, actually. We go there all the time. Hana offers upscale, authentic Vietnamese cuisine with a contemporary flair with the goal to cook for and treat their customers as family. Modern Vietnamese Bistro was voted as the best Vietnamese cuisine in 2016 and 2017 by the San Jose News Readers' Choice Awards. That's very impressive. Modern Vietnamese Bistro supports local community groups, nonprofits by providing in-kind donations, and supports various downtown events by conveniently offering Vietnamese sandwiches as the little window vendor. So I know I've stopped by the little window, and I think I've seen other council members doing that also. Modern Vietnamese Bistro is especially grateful to be part of the Los Gatos community and to its team of dedicated staff that provide. So now, therefore, let the town of Los Gatos hereby render with special appreciation and commendation to Hana modern Vietnamese cuisine for over 4 years of service to the town of Los Gatos. So thank you. Say a few words.
Thank you. I'm really honored for this award. I'd like to especially thank you to the Mayor Rob Renner and the Town Council and his staff for considering Hannah. I'm looking forward to a lot more happy days at the town, and you know, this is like my best Christmas present. Thank you. I'm so blessed, and I want to thank you, the town of Los Gatos, to make me feel so at home. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get a picture. Thank you. And one more round of applause. Okay, so next up, we get to do some more awards. I'm going to invite Supervisor Wasserman up to join us here at the podium. I'm also going to invite Shomil Jain from our Youth Commission and Sawi Regani, then Sergeant Kalipo Kuwalawo. Sorry. Is he here? Yep, please join us up here. Thomas Cook, Diana Abadi. Diana is not here, I don't think. And Karen Briones, Tom Picro. Okay, so then I'll turn it over to Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. And as soon as I finish saying, there we go, the awards under there. That's right.
Let me dig those out.
That's right. That's great. Thank you. As soon as I finish my speaking points here, I'll invite those members of Public Health from Santa Clara County that are here tonight for a photo, if that's all right with you, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here tonight representing Santa Clara County in partnership with our Public Health Department to recognize the Los Gatos Town Council and staff with 3 Healthy Cities Awards. The Healthy Cities Initiative facilitates and celebrates leadership efforts of cities to improve community health and prevent chronic diseases like overweight, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. Our partnership with towns and cities is critical to the prevention of chronic diseases and the long-term well-being of our residents, and I thank Los Gatos for all of their leadership on this front. For this award, I'm pleased to present for the first award, I'm pleased to present the town of Los Gatos with an exemplary city award for inclusive and comprehensive health planning and programs, for offering a robust employee wellness program to town staff, because your general plan, updated in 2010, I remember that year, incorporates language in its human services element that promotes public health, physical activity, and healthy lifestyle choices. And because Los Gatos was recently recognized as an age-friendly city by the World Health Organization. And this is the first award here. And Mr. Mayor, who did you wish, there you are, who did you wish to receive these awards? We've got 3 of them to give out. How do you want that done?
Well, we've got, how are we supposed to do this? We've got different groups with us, so that health, all at once, maybe?
Should we do one big team photo?
I think it's one big team photo because we've got number of people kind of involved in the health programs.
That sounds good. I'll buzz through this because I know you got a big agenda. Second, I am pleased to present the town of Los Gatos with an exemplary city award for safe routes to schools. Since 2006, yes, agreed. Round of applause. Since 2006, the town of Los Gatos has worked with Los Gatos Union School District and the Public Health Department to build an innovative Safe Routes to School program that has evolved to now become an innovative model for other programs in the county. And the addition of a Safe Routes to School coordinator helped spark a Los Gatos Montessorino Safe Routes to School nonprofit coalition to guide efforts to promote safe walking and bicycling to school. And with strong support from the town of Yes, I got that wrong. From the Town Public Works Department and the Los Gatos Montessorino Police Department, the multidisciplinary team members, which also includes parents, students, and school staff, are continuously working together to create a safer and healthier Los Gatos. And Mr. Mayor, this is award number 2. You're cleaning up tonight.
All right.
There you go. For that. Round of applause for all those individuals and departments involved in making that happen. And for the third recognition, I'm delighted to present the Town of Los Gatos a Best in Tobacco-Free Communities Award. Los Gatos earned this recognition for taking significant steps to protect residents, visitors, and workers from the harmful impacts of secondhand smoke through the adoption of a smoke-free housing policy and the expansion of existing secondhand smoke protections to include outdoor public spaces, all workplaces, and even ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft. The county and the town also work together on a tobacco retail permit ordinance, which aims to keep tobacco away from kids and restricts the sale of menthol cigarettes and other flavored tobacco products marketed to children and youth. Of course, good policy takes more than just adoption. It requires strong implementation, enforcement, and compliant monitoring. The town also earned this award due to the actions of the Los Gatos Police Department in performing, and you too, Chief, in performing undercover operations to ensure that stores are not selling tobacco products to youth. And the big finale, in order to accomplish all of this great work, the county has had the pleasure to work with many incredible Los Gatos staff, including Town Manager Laurel Privetti and her team, the Safe Routes to School program team and partners, the Los Gatos Youth Commission, yay! Town Attorney Rob Schultz, all who have been tremendous partners on the tobacco prevention policy work. Congratulations again for your achievements and for your efforts to promote the public health of all residents, employees, and visitors. I look forward to our continued partnership with the town of Los Gatos and want to reiterate that the county is committed to supporting you, however possible, as you take on more of this great work. And as I bring out this third award, I'd like to ask representatives from the county's public health department to come on up. Oh, this is nice. That's really nice. Come on up for the photo op. Come on, you guys. Very modest, talented people. Get up here. Good. And we'll do a team photo.
So just briefly, of course, I want to thank you, our Supervisor Wasserman. I think it's kind of a surprise to us because we're just doing what we think is good for Los Gatos, building safe routes to school. You know, the tobacco, our tobacco regulations just felt like the right solution, and then to actually be, and of course our healthy cities, age-friendly cities, all just seemed like the right thing to do. And then to have the county say, you guys are being exemplary is I think surprising and very nice. So thank you for recognizing us.
Very well. It's easy to think about issues and to come up with solutions, but not many people follow through, and then follow through in the manner that you did. And exemplary is a good word. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next on our agenda is closed session report. Mr. Schultz, please.
Yes, good evening. Prior to tonight's regular session, council met in closed session to discuss the annual review of the town attorney and also to discuss compensation paid to the town attorney and the town manager. No action was taken that requires reporting under the Brown Act.
All right, thank you. Next up is council/town manager reports. We'll start with council, and if Councilmember Jensen is ready, I'll start on the left side for a change.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I have to report is a meeting of the Policy Committee, which happened on December 14th, at which Councilwoman Sayak was also present. We discussed street pole banners, temporary signs, and we also reviewed with other interested people who hadn't met with us before the Hillside Design Guideline visibility standards that are coming before us tonight.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Since our last regular meeting, I attended the West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors meeting where there were no public hearings, but we did recognize the service of Ken Yeager, who will be retiring from that board, as well as one of the employees of the West Valley Sanitation District.
Okay, thank you. So I attended several things. LAFCO Commission meeting, where I'm a commissioner on the 6th. The Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Risk Oversight Committee on the 11th. I chaired the board meeting on the 13th for the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority. I attended the VTA Policy Advisory Committee on the 14th. Also, I attended the Silicon Valley Leadership Annual Reception, where I spent some time lobbying State Senator Jerry Hill, and Assemblyman Ash Carla on Silicon Valley clean energy issues. I also attended the City Association's holiday party afterwards. And I attended the Ad Hoc Parking Committee yesterday. And let's see, also on Saturday the 16th, I guess I hosted, or I kicked off the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, gave a welcome to its members that included members from our BPAC from Los Gatos and Campbell, and our town Parks and Public Works Director and staff gave a tour of our bike improvements that we've achieved so far around town, and also looked at some of our problem areas and plans for future improvements. That was pretty well attended. There was 40 of us about, I would say, actually got on our bikes and rode around the town to the different locations. So I want to thank our Parks and Public Works Director, Matt Morley, for hosting the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, and to them for also coming to Los Gatos and recognizing us by doing that. Also, I wanted to mention a meeting. The town manager and I, and again, Parks and Public Works Director, myself, the mayor of Montecito, had a meeting that Carl Gardino organized to look at how can we make Highway 17 more efficient. What kind of improvements could we do? We met at Carl Gardino's office, but we also had on the phone the general manager from VTA, Nuria Fernandez, and some of her staff. We also had Caltrans staff on the phone. So we had a good discussion about how do we get something going to help move cars down 17 more efficiently without, or try to get them to take 17 instead of cutting through our town. I'd say the results of our discussion was all of the agencies that were involved were all supportive and looking to help us. Issues being there isn't any plans or budgets for that yet. We also determined a study was required to determine what kinds of efficiency improvements would be needed. And we also agreed to invite Saratoga and Campbell to, so far we had Los Gatos and Montecito, to also join us in future discussions. So that's my report, and Councilmember Sayak, please.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. In addition to the Policy Committee that has already been mentioned, the Peninsula Division of the League of California Cities met to go over 2018 priorities, one of which is CalPERS, our pension liability, and I volunteered our town to host the February meeting. So we are expected to host that on February 9th. In addition to that, there was a Wreath Across America ceremony. It's our first annual at Los Gatos Memorial Park. Our own town clerk was also present, and we laid 1,750 wreaths across grave sites of our veterans in town, and we hope to do this on an annual basis.
Sorry, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Mayor Rennie said, the Parking and Infrastructure Subcommittee met last night, and significantly, We analyzed the potential cost of the parking garage and related structures, and are going to come back at a future meeting to see how those costs might be met.
Thank you. Town manager report?
Thank you. I'd like to wish the mayor and council a happy holiday and a reminder that our town offices are closed beginning on Friday, the 22nd of December, and we reopen on Tuesday, the 2nd of January. Our library will be closed the 23rd through the 26th of December, and again on the 31st through the 1st of January. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Okay, so next up is consent calendar. Would any members of the council wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? I see none. And I have a card for item number 3 on the consent calendar. Would you like to have that pulled? Okay, so I have item number 3 pulled by a member of the public. Would anybody else from the public wish to pull an item? Okay, seeing none, I'll come back to the council. So we will be pulling item number 3, and we still have items 1 through 14 minus 3 available. Councilmember Jensen.
Move approval of the consent calendar consisting of items 1 through 14, excluding 3.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments, further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. So I'll go back and do item number 3. I'm forgetting because I think some of the other agencies we do it in a different order. So I'll go to number 3, and if I could start with staff. Should I start with staff first? Okay. So staff report, please.
So just a quick staff report for your consideration. As is our practice, the mayor nominates council members to serve on various boards and commissions beyond the town council. We are asked to serve in many different capacities. Those recommendations are contained in the attachment to this report, and they are effective when approved on January 1st.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council members? Okay, seeing none, I'll open the public testimony. I have a card from Angelia Dorner. Would you like to address us, please?
Hello, Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove. Very quickly, the only comment that I have is that I was surprised to see that the Council Policy Committee is scheduled just as on an as-needed basis, because there were a lot of policy committee meetings this last year. In addition, the fact that the agenda will not be posted until 24 hours prior to the meeting, when all other meetings are 72-hour advance notice. I think it's critical, especially given the types of things that have gone through the policy committee this last year and then have come to council, had to go back, forth, et cetera. They're really substantive issues, and they need to be dealt with, but a lot is lost if that conversation stuff is not brought forward to the council, or if the public does not have adequate opportunity to participate. So I just was wondering why that occurred, and I would suggest or respectfully request that the 72-hour notice is given, and that at least there be some kind of a anticipated schedule. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question for Ms. Dorner? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Dorner. Would anybody else wish to speak to us on item number 3 of consent? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public testimony, and I'll go ahead and ask Town Manager a question. Could you explain why the policy committee only needs to be 24 hours versus are you other types of meetings?
The policy committee is considered having special meetings, so that's why we don't have the 72-hour requirement. However, we do typically post the agenda for the policy committee over 72 hours before the meeting. It's typically posted on the Friday before a Thursday meeting, so the public has ample opportunity to know what is on the agenda, and then we typically push out that agenda in the What's New, so that way community members who are following the policy committee have the opportunity. We do the same for the other council committees.
Any further questions for staff? I'll just ask one more. So I know we've talked about having some things at policy committee that we want to gather more public input. The policy committee could request earlier notification if they wanted to.
Yeah, I think, we're, according to the proposal before you this evening, we're going to have a slightly different membership. So at our first meeting, we would be happy to discuss with the committee your preference if you'd like to set up a regular schedule and what your preferences are in terms of receiving material. So we're flexible to work with the committee as it prefers.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm looking for a motion. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will move to adopt the council committee appointments effective January 1st, 2018, and encourage whoever's on the policy committee to address the issues raised by the speaker and the town manager.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Would anybody like to comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you. So let me check with the town manager. So we're going to do other business before we do verbal communication?
We typically do verbal communications before, so it's your preference, Mayor. If you'd rather do verbal communications at this time, that...
I would like to do that. It feels a little odd.
Okay.
So right now I'm going to open verbal communications for anybody who wishes to comment on items not on the agenda. And it looks like I have several cards here. So I'll go ahead and call up Jack Lucas.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to let Trustee Fish, and I'll follow her, if it's all right with you.
Do I have a card for her? Yes, I do. So Susan Fish, then we'll let you go first.
Good evening. My name is Susan Fish, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees for the West Valley Mission Community College District. But more importantly, along with my colleague Jack Lucas, we represent the residents of the town of Los Gatos in the district. My purpose tonight is to introduce ourselves and to invite you. We'd like to have you come to campus. We'd like to share a meal with you, have you meet the trustees, and to give you a tour of our campus. There are amazing things happening at West Valley College. And this, what I believe to be the absolute jewel in the crown of all the community colleges, is in our backyard. We have all kinds of resources, all kinds of things for the residents of the town of Los Gatos that are happening. And I won't steal Chancellor Schmidt's thunder, but that's our hope, is that we can partner with you so that we can more effectively meet the needs of our constituents, to let them know what's happening at the colleges, to let them know what's happening and available for our town members of all ages. I and my family have personally benefited from West Valley. I graduated, my two daughters graduated, and my husband taught organic chemistry for 26 years. So there's a lot there for all of us of any age, and that's what we want to do. And as a trustee, my goal is to keep the college relevant, available, and affordable. And I'd like to turn the mic over to Trustee Lucas.
So let me see if anybody wants to ask a question of you so far. Does any member of council wish to ask a question? I do have a question for you. It sounds very exciting to come over and learn more about West Valley and learn how we can partner with you. What's the best way to contact you? I see you have an email on the card. Should I share that with council members?
Certainly, and we can work with the Chancellor's office, but I know personally that President Davis gives a heck of a tour. So to see the creek that's been refurbished, the new Silker design studios, there's just so much that's new and exciting and in the process of being built. I think you would be impressed.
And second thing, I really liked organic chemistry. Can I get a lesson?
Oh my goodness, that was such a hard class. I'm sure most of the students dreaded OChem.
All right, thank you. No other questions? All right, so let's, next up, Jack Lucas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We're back on our schedule now with the three of us here. My name is Jack Lucas. I live at 17171 Xena Avenue in Monte Sereno. Before I give you my part in this little performance that we're putting on, I'd just like to go into the past. For 20 years, 5 terms, I served on the Monte Sereno City Council. I was the mayor 5 times. I know what you go through. I found it rewarding, and but what I really enjoyed about my term in municipal government was the interaction we had with Los Gatos. The merging of the police departments, building, safety. It was a great experience, and I know for a fact that we're still in that era of good feeling, that you're working very well with my town, Monte Sereno, and I appreciate it. Now, I'll put on my trustee hat. 4 years ago, the California Redistricting Act became law. Didn't affect West Valley College. It only affects those bodies, those entities in which there are large minority pockets. We don't have those in West Valley College. But what we did decide, we said, let's do it anyway. Let's redistrict. Let's carve up West Valley Mission Community College District into 7 areas because we have 7 council members. So what I'm getting at, we cut Los Gatos right down the middle, right down Santa Cruz Avenue. I am in trustee area number 5. It's everything west of Santa Cruz Avenue. And my colleague and friend, Trustee Fish, has everything east of Santa Cruz Avenue. I lost a little of my power base, but anyway, it happens. Both of us represent Los Gatos. Now, having said that, please feel free to call either of us. I think I left you my card, or either if you have any questions, albeit Trustee Area 7 or Trustee Area 5, please feel free to give us a call. And I would hope that you would take advantage of Trustee Fish's invitation. Come see us. We're the college in your backyard. We can show you things that you've probably first light. Okay, I'm out of here.
Got 30 seconds.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you for your time.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Lucas? Seeing none, thank you. So next up, we'll have Patrick Schmidt, also from West Valley Mission College.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the Town Council. My name is Patrick Schmidt. I happen to be the Chancellor of West Valley Mission College Community College District. I've been privileged to be that for about 5.5 years now. I would like to underscore and affirm our trustees' invitation to you to come over and tour the campus. I think you'll find that there's a lot happening. I'd like to also extend it to any member of the audience who wants to come over and see what's happening. We are doing some things in 2018 that I think will amaze you. For instance, we are opening a brand new planetarium, state-of-the-art digital planetarium on the West Valley campus. We're going to have, we're going to open it to youth groups, to libraries, to K-8s and K-12s, so that they can come in and look at the stars in a way that unfortunately you just can't do in the valley anymore. We've got a new reinvigorated creek that you can walk with trails attendant to it. We have a new science walk that we're building. We're putting together we've put together, I should say, a new school of art and design, the Silker School of Art and Design. We're looking for accreditation, national accreditation for all of our art schools, our School of Music, our School of Theater, our School of Art and Design. All of them, we hope, will be nationally accredited. Many exciting things happening. In the last 15 years or so, you, along with the rest of my district, have been generous enough to vote for the bonds that have reconstructed our campuses. I want you to come and see how we're spending your money. I think you'll be pleased and excited by what's going on just down the street from you. So please, take us up on our offer. come on over, just walk the campus. You'll find a lot of our neighbors do it. We have farmers markets there on the weekends. It's a beautiful pastoral campus to walk. So I open my arms to you in invitation. Come and enjoy the campus that you have helped to build. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. And again, I thank the three of you for coming and reaching out to us to get involved. I really like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up for verbal communication, Angelia Dorner.
Hello, Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. I'm really excited that the concrete removal and replacement work has been going so successfully on the project, and I guess Tate is going to be the first one to be done soon. I wanted to mention that the sidewalk and curb and gutter work has been done between Bean and Nicholson since about a week after Halloween. And so a couple of weeks ago, someone came to my home and was sent to my house by her employer to find out what she could do about a parking ticket that she got on this particular block because that's where she always parks when she works. And I went back to the website and saw that they're actually going to try to keep that temporary 24-hour parking only by permit for that particular block until all the work is done, even though no work is going to be done on that, no concrete work is going to be started until the spring. It just makes absolutely no sense to me. And I think there's a huge disconnect, similar to the disconnect that Alex Holt mentioned before about special events, vitality, and our town. Because here we're talking about a parking garage, one of the most important things that we need downtown, and we're offering valet parking, free unlimited parking in Lot 4. However, now we're going to have no parking, which has always been used for employee parking. That's the one strip in the Almond Grove where the residents voted not to have any permit parking. The rest of the area is all 2-hour permit parking. So I would just request, there's probably about 60 spaces that are lost right there, and that's on the corner of St. Mary's as well. And so people from St. Mary's, it's going to be the winter season. I mean, it just makes no sense to me. We also have probably about 80 to 90 parking spaces between Miles and Bentley on Edelin, which has always been no parking. So I just really think that we need to do something about, especially the Tate block. You could just, tack up some other sign over the top if you want to make it 2 hours to be consistent, fine, although those neighbors did not go through the formal process of requesting that. But I just think it's very, very unfair. And then the other last thing is that tonight, wow, something's going on at St. Mary's because it's like crazy. But at the corner of Tate and Bean, there's a huge blinking sign. Now, we can't put up signs in advance of doing special events. We can't put up signs in advance of doing closing the ramp. But we have a sign up there now that says Tate will be closed for road work. It's blinking. Use alternative routes from January through September. Now, I just really just don't get it, why we are closing off the street for parking and trying to put all this going on when there's nothing that's going to be going on. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Dorner? Vice Mayor Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rainey. This is just a question for staff. If they could address Ms. Dorner's questions regarding this parking situation and get those answered. I have received many correspondences from her in the recent past about this same issue, especially with the parking along Tate and Bean.
We will make this a council referral and look into it and get back to the council.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have no more cards for verbal communication. Would anybody else wish to speak to us on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, I will close verbal communication and move us to other business, which is item number 15, which is Bachman Park Rehabilitation Project. And turn it over to staff.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Lisa Peterson, Town Engineer. I'm here tonight to talk about the Bachman Park Rehabilitation Project. Specifically tonight, my main focus is going to be on the proposed design scope. I did want to go over a couple of points on the background. The project budget is $540,000. Of that, approximately 60% is from the town general funds and 40% is community development block grant funds. And those funds do need to be spent on the park pathway ADA accessible upgrades. We did have a community meeting in November. We had approximately 16 members of the public there, and it was a very positive meeting following our presentation. We did ask the residents what they would like to see as far as the scope of the Bachman Park project. And residents came up with a list of items, both upgrades and some maintenance items that they wanted to see. We did ask them to prioritize the upgrades that they wanted to see in the park, which they did. And we have included all those important upgrades in the project scope that we're presenting to council tonight. Additionally, the maintenance items will either be taken care of in the project scope or through our PPW maintenance group. In December, the December Parks Commission meeting also discussed the proposed scope for the Bachman Park project, and the commission was supportive of that scope. So I wanted to go quickly through a couple of the items that are in the proposed scope. This is an aerial view of Bachman Park. And the red dot is the location where the picture you see up on the left of the screen is at approximate location. So one of the items that we'll be including, or we're recommending to include in the design scope, is the ADA pathway upgrades, which is required as part of the grant. We're also proposing to include in new light poles. The light poles are probably original and they are rusting at the base. One of the items that was most important to residents who attended the meeting and came up as their #1 priority for upgrades in the Bachman Park project was putting in some sort of sidewalk or pathway along the Bachman side of the park. And the reason is there was a lot of concern because residents currently have to walk in the street because there is no pathway along that side of the park. Oops. There was also some mention regarding the benches getting high because of soil that's been displaced underneath the benches. So we are going to look at that. We're including that in the scope. Additionally, residents wanted to see new trash cans. Although that's not something that got on the list in your report, it is something that we are planning on replacing the old trash cans with new trash cans as part of the scope. We're also going to be fixing the retaining walls out there, the failing block retaining walls, and putting in new concrete walls. And residents also mentioned landscaping as important to them, both maintenance of the existing landscaping and looking at upgrades to the landscaping out there as well. So something that's in the council report also, it discusses additive scope to the project, and this would be if we had additional budget where we could add scope. This chart is something that council has seen before, and what this shows is when we're in the conceptual or we're defining a project, typically at that point we have a lot of cost uncertainty as far as what the cost of the project will be, and that's where we are currently with the Bachman Park project. Now when we get to the final design of the project, when we get to 100% cost estimate for the project, at that point we have a pretty good idea of what the project is going to cost. Now at that point, if we do have additional money in the budget, we would like to add some scope to the project, and we're recommending adding the scope in the priority that we've listed below. The first one being resurfacing and restriping the basketball court, and that is a very highly used basketball court. Also providing a new water fountain out there. The water fountain does often have maintenance issues, so we wanted to put a new water fountain out there if we have the additional money in the budget. And then finally, a resident had mentioned building an ADA path to the basketball court. We could get that in if we did have the budget for that. So our next steps for the project would be if council did approve the proposed design scope, we would begin designing the project. We would then return to council in February with that final design. If council approves the final design, we would move into bidding and awarding contracts in the February-March timeframe and hope to begin construction in the spring of 2018. That's the end of my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you. Ms. Peterson, I'm curious about the monies on the block grant. Your presentation and the staff report indicates that they need to be used for ADA. Is that all of the funds for ADA? Because on page 2 of the staff report, under discussion, the second paragraph says, quote, as mentioned in the background section of this report, to receive the CDBG grant funds, the town must include pathway accessibility upgrades. So is it include or is it build?
So we can both build new pathways as long as they are ADA. For instance, the one that we're talking about, possibly if we have additional money, we could put an ADA pathway to the basketball court. That would be paid for by CDBG funds. Additionally, the existing pathways out there need to be pulled out, specifically the asphalt pathway, and it needs to be rebuilt to meet ADA standards.
Go ahead, continue.
I must have asked my question poorly. All $214,000 must be ADA, used for ADA improvements, whatever they might be. I can't make some, include an ADA improvement, and do something else. All $214,000. I'm looking at Mr. Morley, who's nodding his head vigorously.
Yes, correct. That's correct.
What if, and I'm not saying that the town would do this, just as for general knowledge, what if the town or any jurisdiction said, that's great, we have $214,000 grant that we applied for, and we said we're going to use it for ADA, and we got it. And we don't do that, because if you look at the community meeting, I'm not saying that I agree with it, but there's zero votes for ADA. So then what happens? Can the town then take that $214,000 and use it at a different park, or does it have to be here?
So the grant funds have to be spent by fall of 2018, so we would not be able to use it for another project. I would say that when residents were voting, which you see on page 3 of your report, what they were specifically voting on was building an ADA path to the basketball court and to the benches. What we had told residents during the course of our discussion is that there were certain items that we needed to include in the project, and one of those items was rebuilding the pathways to make them ADA compliant. So that was never actually voted on by residents. We asked them to provide additional upgrades they would like to see.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Vice Mayor Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Ms. Peterson, was it ever considered that a restroom be added to this park, and why not?
When we were at the community meeting, that was something that the residents were very vocal about. They said they absolutely did not want a restroom at Bachman Park. I think they have some concern about it changing from sort of a sleepy neighborhood park to a park that maybe will start attracting a lot of other people from outside the area and maybe have undesirable activities happen around the bathroom.
Follow up, go ahead.
I guess my feelings about that are if you're going to be expending, upwards of $500,000 in public funds, it should be open to the public and not just a few homes surrounding the park. So I would want it to be more useful to everybody, because it is public funds and it is in our community.
Okay, further questions? Councilmember Sack?
So, Ms. Peterson, if I could follow up on Councilmember Johnson's question. So with the tracking of the 214, that's for ADA accessibility, once we get our bids in and you're actually paying out what's being constructed. If there's a cost saving and we're able to look at either the restriping or the new water fountain, that 214 that we get from CDBG funds, is that strictly just for accessibility, even if the contract or the bid comes back lower than we anticipate?
Yes.
So how would we then expend those funds so that if everything comes back lower?
So at this point, we believe we're going to expend all of those funds for the pathway. The pathway project is expensive.
It is, okay. Okay. But what if? So is that then set aside for other ADA, or that we just lose that?
We would lose it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, further questions? All right, seeing none, let me open public testimony on this item, and I don't think I have any cards. Would anybody wish to address us on this item? Seeing nobody rushing forward, I will close the public testimony and come back to council. Oh, we do have someone rushing forward. So, Mrs. Lee Quintana, you can fill out your card afterwards. We know who you are.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I'd just like to comment about the issue of the park being available to just beyond the immediate neighborhood. And I'm going to talk about an incident that happened many, many, many years ago when we first moved to Los Gatos. There was a volleyball court there, and it was very popular on the weekends for people to play volleyball. And they came not just from the area immediately around Bachman Park, but from other places in the town. The neighbors complained, and there was a council hearing, and the issue was that this court was attracting people from outside of the area, and they didn't like that, and by that they meant San Jose and other areas. And they showed lots of slides to prove that. Turns out that the person they were concentrating on was my husband, who lives 4 blocks away. However, that volleyball court was eliminated, and we were told that it would be reevaluated in a year. It never was. So I guess what I'm saying, please keep an open mind, keep the park open.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Katana? Seeing none. Would anybody else wish to address us? Seeing none rushing forward this time, I will close the public testimony and come back to council for further questions, discussion, a motion. Councilmember Jensen.
I was going to try a motion, if I might. And my motion would be to approve the scope elements for the project, and by that I am meaning those bullet points that appear on page 4 of 6 under proposed scope. And I'm assuming that when the design comes back, in theory, those can be adjusted if need be based on budgeting a design, but those are a general scope. So that my meeting is assuming that, my motion is assuming that. That we authorize the preparation of plans and specifications in alignment with the scope, that we authorize the expenditure and budget of $214,537 for the block grant for ADA access improvements, and we authorize the transfer of that money from the grant to the rehabilitation project in our budget, and that we authorize the town manager to execute the community development block grant agreement with the County of Santa Clara. And I'm just going to add a comment to my motion. I completely agree with the Vice Mayor. This is a public park for use of the residents of Los Gatos and whoever else wants to come and use that park. So any suggestion that it should not be used by whoever wants to come and use it, I would be adamantly opposed to.
All right, I have a motion. Councilmember Sack.
I'll second the motion with the sentiment expressed.
Okay, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. I will be supporting the motion, and also note that from my experience at Bachman Park, it is widely used, and the use is not limited to just the residents surrounding the park.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Vice Mayor Leonatus.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. I know that this project has been coming up every year, and we discuss it, and for some reason it seems like it has to be done. regarding the ADA path. I appreciate that we are getting grant money for that. Personally, I would like to see more improvements to the park. To me, it seems like the improvements are so minor that no one is going to notice them. So I'm not quite sure of the efficacy of these improvements. With that said, I do respect the neighborhood, but I want to emphasize the comments that were echoed by Councilmember Jensen and the others, that please welcome your neighbors and please welcome others to your community to share your public parks, as we would welcome anybody to our parades or our events or our libraries or anything else.
Thank you. So I will be town manager.
Thank you. I just wanted a clarification on the motion. If, as we're doing the plans and specs, we find that we might be able to accommodate some additional items, as noted in the middle of page 4, we wonder if the motion contemplates the ability to add the 3 items in the middle of that page. The resurfacing and striping of the court, providing a new water fountain, and then building the ADA path to the basketball court.
The restriping, I wasn't thinking about those in particular, but is it possible that that can be delayed until we find out whether there are funds to allow that, or do we have to consider that now?
We can wait. I think we were just looking at if we had the authority to include them in the plans and specs, we might be a little bit ahead of ourselves. That way, when we do go out to bid, if we get the cost estimates for those extra items and it turns out we can afford them, then we would have already done those plans and specs.
So, as the maker of the motion, I was not intending to include those. I would rather wait because I'm hearing some different ideas about how extra funds might be used.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there was no changes, so I don't need to check in with the seconder. I would say that I'm going to support the motion. As Vice Mayor Leonardis said, this has come back to us several years in a row, so I'm sure that it is well thought through and it has been to the community several times, so I'm sure that it is a well planned out project. So I'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. So that's item number 15. We'll close that and move on to item number 16 of other business, which is to authorize the town manager to seek proposals to produce and manage the park summer concert series held on the Los Gatos Civic Center lawn each June through August, formerly known as Music in the Park. Staff report, please.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. This item was in front of you just 2 weeks ago, if you recall, and when we discussed the contract that we were trying to renew between the town and the nonprofit organization that had the contract for the last 2 years. If you recall, there were a couple of sticking points that staff had with the organizer, nonprofit group, and those had to deal with, they were requesting $5,000 additional funds in security, and also a waiver of the no alcohol policy in the lobby of the council chambers. Council at the December 5th meeting agreed to another 2-year agreement under the same terms and conditions as the previous one, but waited to allocate any further funds until a subsequent hearing we're going to do regarding all special events, and also upheld our policy not allowing alcohol in the lobby of the council chambers. 2 days later, the nonprofit organization contacted the town and sent a letter and said that they were no longer interested in managing the concert series. With that, staff put together this staff report very quickly to do a request for proposal. That's attached as attachment A, and we're looking for approval to send that out as quickly as possible with a short turnaround, so that we can see what proposals we get to come back to you probably in the second meeting in January or first one in February, to already see if we've got someone else that can manage the concerts in the park. I will say that after receiving the letter, I did reach out just to make certain that if there was some discussion with council on maybe reconsidering and granting the $5,000 or waiving the policy, whether that was a possibility, whether they would reconsider not managing it anymore, and they said no, they're not interested in it regardless of whether council reconsidered that decision or not. So with that, really the only alternative, well, there's an alternative of not doing anything, but the staff's recommendation is let's send out a request for proposal and see what we get. The other one would be not doing anything, and possibly staff would have to come back to see if there was still interest in seeing what those resources and costs would be.
Okay, so I do have a question for you, Mr. Schultz. In here you talked about options. One is issue a request for proposal. The other would be, I guess, the town produce, manage, and coordinate the music in the park. So one of the things that's key about making this affordable is all the sponsorships. So my question is, if the town managed it, we're not able to take sponsorships. Is that correct? So maybe you can answer what kind of combination agreements between town and somebody else allow us to take sponsorships?
We wouldn't be able to under our current policy, and that's where I mentioned it would exceed 50,000 for sure, because I look back at some of the contracts that we entered into, and the main contracts were for the engineering sound system, and in 2009 that was 6,000 for the season. I imagine that's much more. And then for the 10 concerts, you're paying anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000. And that would not include, hopefully the town would be able to organize volunteers to help out with all the other things that were needed. So that's basically a $50,000 price tag that council would have to find the time to do that. And then there's the associated resources with time to line those bands up and find those contracts. And that's why we're not recommending that idea. As opposed to if you do the RFP and a nonprofit moves forward, or even a for-profit, they're able to go out and find those sponsorships to pay for those concerts or pay for those sound engineer as part of the sponsorships.
Okay.
Certainly the other alternatives, the council could relook at their sponsorship program and allow the town to partner with sponsorships, but currently we don't allow that.
Okay, and since it's just occurred, there's probably a lot of sponsors available now, but the longer we wait in years, they may disappear. Any further questions from council members? Okay, seeing none, let me open this up to public comment. What I don't have, wait a minute, I do have one card on this item. Angelia Dorner, we'll start with you, please.
Angelia Dorner, very proud resident of the Almond Grove. You all know how important music in the park was to me when I moved here 20 years ago, not knowing anybody. And I just really hope that there's some way that we can find a way to continue this fabulous, fabulous event. I also wanted to let you know that I recently completed the CERT training, which is the Community Emergency Response Training. And when this was being discussed 2 weeks ago, I started thinking about, well, there's a lot of people in CERT that would really like to be involved in something, more things in the community, especially if we don't have to wait for a disaster. It will also give us a better teamwork environment if we did more things. So I actually contacted Dave Nauman, who runs the DART process with Los Gatos Police Department. And they actually did the security, traffic control, first aid, et cetera, for the last dance in Oak Meadow Park. But then obviously they were not involved with anything at the other 10 concerts. So anyway, I talked with him about that, and I just wanted to let you all know that this might be a perfect opportunity for CERT and DART. CERT people could get more involved with DART and become DART trained as well. Benefits to Music in the Park would be traffic control, could have a first aid booth, could have lost parents being found, direct contact with LGPD and the fire department. And benefits to the town would be volunteers, and volunteers who want to make the commitment to the community, increase community exposure and DART CERT participation so that we can actually promote the entire program, and also to develop a community-wide response team harmony, because the more that we end up working together, the better we can respond to some kind of a disaster should it occur or any other event. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm volunteering my time to coordinate with the CERT folks and some of the CERT people that I've already started coordinating things with, as well as with the DART people, to see if it's something that you guys are interested in having me/us pursue in connection with music in the park. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Dorner? Okay, seeing none, thank you. So I don't have any other cards on this issue. Would anybody else wish to speak to us? Seeing nobody rushing forward, I'll close the public testimony for this item and come back to council for questions, motion, discussion. Councilmember Sack.
So first, I want to thank Ms. Dorner for offering the idea. A lot of ideas are swirling right now, and one of the unfortunate things is I think I'm in agreement that if there's some way to save music in the park, that's the preferred option, and I was hopeful that we would have had that continued conversation with the producers. But I just want to clarify from our town attorney, based on your conversation, an additional volunteer effort from DART, from CERT, is something that they are not at all interested in. Mr. Schultz? Okay.
They're not at all interested.
And if we were then, the second question is, if we were then to issue a RFP, it would contain all the same elements that we did last time, and based on that, we would see what if any additional costs would be requested of us, and we'd be able to fold that into the discussion of special events that we're hoping to have in the end of January?
Correct.
Okay.
You're correct. But well, let me correct that. The proposal doesn't put any parameters right now in our proposals. We felt we would leave it open, so it doesn't specifically say, here's the contract and here's what you have to sign in order for to obtain the managing and promotion of the contract. So we could get proposals where they're asking for $50,000. We could be getting proposals for them asking for nothing, or some other type of support from the town. But from our staff standpoint, we felt we wanted to leave it as open and broad as possibly, just to see what we would have, and we'll bring those proposals back for you for your consideration.
Okay.
I would also state the big issue I don't think is the volunteers. I think any organization that's done it has been able to find those volunteers. That's been not the issue. It was more just the time of the board. They mentioned how much time it takes and how it is difficult to find the sponsors and the bands, and going through them and auditioning them and determining which ones are appropriate.
Councilmember Jensen, you had your hand up next.
I was going to make a motion, but Councilmember Leonardis looks like he's got something
Vice
to
Mayor
do.
Leonardis, go ahead with your questions.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. I noticed Ms. Perfetti had her hand up, but I just wanted to ask staff, how do other communities run their music programs? Everybody's got one. Is it sponsored and paid for by their entities?
We certainly can bring that information back, but it's a wide gamut. Many towns and cities do it internally, and use general funds to pay the bands and pay the engineers, and don't even receive outside sponsors. Some do a mixture of trying to get sponsors for each of the bands. So for example, each weekend a different sponsor would be able to sponsor that Sunday and be able to pick the band that they want for that Sunday. So it's across the board. You'll find different ones. Obviously, from the staff standpoint, is we'd like to keep the town general fund as whole as possible, and not require additional funds to be put in, and put that on the nonprofit group, as we've been able to do since 2009. So I think we'll just have to wait and see what comes in, and we can look at different mechanisms as to how the actual agreement would work, if we can find a partner that we can partner up with.
Thank you.
Town Manager?
Thank you. I just wanted to add that for other communities, it's entirely run and operated by a business improvement district or a downtown association or some other entity. And maybe there's a community grant that a city or town would provide, but it's pretty much all a private enterprise. And then I just wanted to clarify the timing. In the draft RFP that's attached to the report, we are proposing that all proposals would be due on January 24th, which would mean we would have the results for you the first meeting in February. We may have preliminary information in time for the January 16th meeting when we discuss events more broadly, but we figure we should give proposers about a month or so to respond given the holidays.
Okay, so I'll ask a question. Is there any downside to us going out and doing an RFP? I mean, is it a lot of staff time?
No, the RFP is finished. All we have to do is post it and promote it and push it out, and we would encourage anyone else to help in that promotion so we get as broad a response as possible. We figure time is of the essence since summer planning is already happening for many other communities.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Councilmember Jensen, would you still like to try a motion?
Sure. My motion would be that we authorize the town manager to issue an RFP for Music in the Park, and that hopefully we get preliminary information on January 16th when we're trying to do a special events calendar, but we retain the timing that's in the proposal that we have in our report.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Seeing nobody opposed, that would pass unanimously. So we will close item number 16 and move on to item number 17 in our public hearings, which is the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines modification. And I'll turn it over to staff, I guess our associate planner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines were adopted by the Council in January of 2004. Over the course of 3 meetings in 2015, the Planning Commission considered amendments to Chapter 2, Section B of the guidelines regarding the visibility analysis. On February 2nd of 2016, these proposed amendments were considered by the Council and returned to staff for additional analysis. Staff felt that it was appropriate to forward the direction from Council to the Policy Committee for their additional review. The Policy Committee held 5 separate meetings this year to discuss the modifications. The committee met most recently on December 14th, where additional modifications were recommended. The proposed visibility analysis, including these most recent recommendations, are included in the addendum report as attachment 15 of your packet this evening. It was brought to staff's attention this evening that there is also an error on page 13 of attachment 15. The third paragraph on the page includes 3 areas where the term viewing platforms is provided, and this should state viewing areas as recommended by the Policy Committee. Staff recommends that the Town Council adopt the Policy Committee's recommendation as outlined in the resolution in Attachment 12 to amend Chapter 2, Section B of the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines regarding the visibility analysis. This completes staff's presentation, and we are happy to assist the council with any questions that they may have.
Okay, any questions at this time? Okay, seeing no questions, I'll go ahead and open up public testimony for item number 17, and I have 1 card so far from David Weissman.
Evening. After 2.5 years of numerous town hearings, I ask that you pass this draft tonight. I now ask that you turn to numbered page 14 in attachment 15, step H. The proposed language could be more clear with the addition of 6 words as follows. H. A deed restriction shall be required that identifies the on-site trees that were used to provide screening in the visibility analysis and requires replacement screening, and here are the 6 words, in the same location or near, pursuant to the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines, and or the tree protection ordinance if those trees die or are removed. I also have a related issue. Over the past 10 years, the town has had 4 different consulting arborists, and as expected, they each produce a slightly different tree report. Those differences generally don't affect the decisions made by the reviewing bodies, except in one important situation. The 2 current arborists do not use intermediate gradations. A tree is either in poor or fair or good condition. Neither assigns intermediate grades such as fair poor. With one arborist, this is not a problem since he also assigns numeric scores which fit fine with the staff draft, where any tree with an overall condition rating of greater than 50% can count as a screening tree. In contrast, the town's other consulting arborist does not use a continuous grading scale. His ratings jump from 25 to 50% with no gradations in between. Such an arbitrary grading system between arborists means that the same tree can be given different assessments. Some trees could be counted as screening in one application and not counted in another, all depending on the arborist. Our town attorney agreed at the last policy committee meeting that this situation is unsatisfactory since all applicants are not treated the same. The only way to ensure equal treatment is by having published uniform town consulting arborist standards. I thus request in the motion to approve staff's draft that you include my 6 extra words and that you also direct staff to develop uniform consulting arborist guidelines. After all, these arborists are hired by the town to provide a work product. We should set the standards that we want.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Weissman? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, next up I have Lee Katana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. Good evening, and I hope you have a good holiday after today for the rest of the year. Actually, 2 of my comments have already been addressed, so I'm left with 2. On the middle of page 14, it states that the locations of viewing areas are shown on the map on the next page and are as follows. I would suggest that while the map indicates that it's a viewing point and that the viewing area is within 500 feet of that point in all directions, that's not clear in the text. So I would suggest that you consider clarifying the list so that it states that it is the origin of the points for determining the viewing area, i.e., the area is 500 feet in any direction along a public street. I don't think there are any parks within that area or other public spaces, but if there were, I would suggest that that also be considered visibility from public spaces. Lastly, rather than the most visible point nearest, or the most visible spot nearest the point where it's obscure, I would suggest that you consider that the point at which the visibility analysis is done is that point within the 500 feet area that is the most visible, not the first point where it's visible. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Quintana? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, so I have no other speaker cards on this. Okay. I see them arm wrestling to see who's going to come forward. So please introduce yourself.
Hi, Bess Worsima, Studio 3. I'm kind of pseudo-representing a bunch of our local architects, as usual. And I just wanted to bring up that at the most recent policy committee meeting, I was very appreciative on the behalf of the local architects that language is added to, or I believe was added to suggest the nearest unobstructed view within a 500-foot radius. This is extremely important to us because if we leave it as an open-ended 500-foot radius, 1,000-foot diameter from any viewing area or platform, that leaves, quite frankly, an unlimited and exponential amount of locations that can be chosen to look at visibility from. And I don't believe that that's the intent when there are specific areas or platforms that are designated. It also potentially creates an extreme amount of additional work that could be scrutinized from an extreme amount of additional people that are not necessarily relevant to the immediate platform as designated.
Okay, let me see if there's any questions. Seeing none, I guess, thank you. Okay, so I have no more cards. Would anybody else wish to come forward? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public testimony, come back to council for more questions, discussion, motion. Councilmember Jensen.
As a member of the policy committee that's been reviewing this along with Councilwoman Sayak, who I hope will correct me if I say something wrong, we have had many, many meetings on this issue, and what we've tried to do as a committee, our theme was, can I see it or can I not see it, and if I can't see it, why? Be that a tree, a wall, a whatever it might be, which goes back to the reflectivity level and everything else. But so what we were trying to do is create rules that made sense and actually analyze visibility. And at our last meeting, we did discuss tree health and how it was replaced. And we were careful to not confuse tree ordinances and tree stewardship with whether I could see it. And we also tried to recognize that where a tree might screen, you might plant or put something else that may provide an equal screen. And with respect to putting it in the same location, we had a discussion about whether or not that made sense. For example, if you had a tree that died from oak root fungus, it made no sense to plant it back in the same place. But the point was that we wanted to provide the screening that was originally present and make sure that it stayed there and then present that language. And we also tried to not get into the weeds, as it were, on very specific language, because we were hoping that, for example, with viewing areas, that could be in consultation with staff, and that we were making that available so that the staff could let architects, other interested parties, opponents, proponents of a particular proposal know where the viewing platform was going to be, because that was going to be determined through staff in something that wasn't necessarily going to be contained in the policy, and that's how we approached it. The reason that we broadened those viewing platform areas is that there are some platforms in town, I think that we all know, where, for example, the one I use all the time is Las Gatas Boulevard and Blossom Hill behind the Chevron station. If I stand behind the sign, I can't see anything. So what we wanted to make clear was that you move from behind the sign and then take your picture at the nearest point where I'm going to be able to see those story poles. So what we were trying to do, hopefully, is incorporate different ways that could be clear for all those who are interested in making this analysis or criticizing the analysis or analyzing the analysis, had a framework that made sense where they could do that, and that's why you have the proposal that the policy committee has brought forward today.
Okay. Councilmember Spector.
Question of staff and then a comment of staff. There was a suggestion made that there needs to be arborist standards, that there are different grading systems. Does staff have any input on that?
I was quoted, I'll say, I was talking more in general. I think all consultants that we have, whether they're dealing with traffic, whether they're dealing with trees, whether they're dealing with a visual analysis, should be consistently have standards so that they're all consistent, because there could be that discrepancy between one or the other. But I don't recommend that the staff, at least from my standpoint, but you can ask them. You just did your priorities and goals, and certainly preparing standards for an arborist or another one isn't necessary. But I think staff can talk with their arborist to see if there's anything we can do to make them as close as possible. And maybe when we go out for further consultants, we can put that into the contracts with them. And that's at least where I'm coming from. I don't know if Joel has anything else to add.
I don't have anything else to add. That hits it perfectly. Thank you.
So if I understand what staff's saying, it's you agree with the concept, but rather than change the wording, do it on a staff process basis? Okay, then the other comment, this is a comment, this is on the section H, and this is my English thing. It says if they die or are removed, I would prefer when this goes to motion that they would be replaced by the trees, or these trees, those trees, so that it refers back to trees, because they could refer back to guidelines as it's currently written.
Okay, so I'll ask a question of staff. Councilmember Jensen described, I think, a good process, but if you could describe the way you think it is, in terms of the concerns of we've decided we don't want to pick one spot for viewing because there might be a sign in front of it. So we're now asking people to be smart and move a little bit. But it does bring up the concern that, well, if you can move anywhere within 500 feet, and let's say we have a house that's right on the edge of becoming visible enough to trigger the next issues, you might have an opponent say, well, if I move to the left, it becomes 0.3% more visible. How do we prevent that kind of, I don't want the Planning Commission to get hung up on something of that sort?
So as proposed, based on the latest policy committee meeting, we did add the words "in consultation with staff." So the applicant is not left on their own, but the staff will be consulted, and it's a mutual decision, and ultimately staff is accountable for the location for the visibility analysis. We do not want to get into a debate at any of our deciding bodies regarding where that location should be.
So then it's clear an opponent of a project couldn't come and say, well, you should have picked this spot. Well, they can always say that, but as far as the applicant goes, the staff had the final say.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for staff? Would anybody like to make a motion or other comments? Councilmember Jensen.
I'm on a roll here, so keep going. I will make a motion that the council adopt the hillside visibility standards that have been proposed to us in attachment 15 with the edit as suggested by Councilwoman Spector.
Okay, do I have a second? Councilmember Sayak.
Since I'm on a roll as well, I'll second the motion. And this is not a part of my motion, but just ask staff to make note that when we do go out for our next RFP for our consulting arborist, that we look at some consistency guidelines so that the issues that were raised can be addressed in that procedure.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. And Councilmember Spector would like comments.
Yeah, this is a comment. I will be supporting the motion, and I totally agree that we as a town need to take whatever steps are reasonable and that can be accomplished so that our arborists have consistent standards.
Any further comments? Okay, Councilmember Jensen.
I'm happy to add that to the motion. It wasn't formally part of the motion, but since it was mentioned by the seconder and another commenter, I'm happy to add that to the motion.
And the seconder is okay with that, I assume, yes? Okay, so Councilmember Sack.
One quick comment, just to those that have been participating on this. It was mentioned that we have spent significant staff time during policy committees, but I do want to also acknowledge that for those that were participating, specifically Dr. Weissman and Ms. Quintana and our many talented architects, that it was a great accomplishment in trying to identify areas that we can reach compromise and bring a policy that we can all agree on moving forward.
All right, so it sounds like very good work by the Policy Committee. Thank you, Policy Committee. I think I'll call a question at this point. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. Let's close item number 17. Move along to item number 18, which is 202 University Avenue General Plan Amendment Application. And it looks like we're going to get Associate Planner Sean Mullen, please. Oh, yes, and yes, before we start, does anybody need to recuse themselves? Councilmember Sack.
Yes, I live within 500 feet of the property.
Same here.
All right, thank you. We'll call you back when we're finished. And while they are leaving, we'll just clarify with the town attorney that any motion is going to need to pass with 3 votes still.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. Take it away, Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you tonight is a request for a general plan amendment from office professional to medium density residential and a zone change from office with a landmark and historic preservation overlay to single family residential downtown with a landmark and historic preservation overlay. The project location is at 202 University Avenue. The requested general plan amendment was reviewed by the General Plan Committee and the Planning Commission, who both forwarded a recommendation of approval to the Town Council. The proposed general plan amendment and zone change would be consistent with the pattern of land use and zoning in the surrounding residential neighborhood. Additionally, replacing the existing office use with a single-family residential use would reduce the parking requirement and traffic. For these reasons and the analysis provided in the staff report, staff recommends that the council make the findings on page 4 of your staff report, adopt a resolution approving the general plan amendment, and introduce an ordinance affecting the zone change. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions? Vice Mayor Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Mr. Mullen, it appears that this is essentially a down zoning in order to change a office building into a single-family home.
That's correct. It's to return a residence back to the use of a residence. It was approved back in 1970 in that era. It was approved to become an office use, and now the current owners wish to return it to a residential use.
Follow on. Go ahead.
One more follow-up, and it will be a single-family home. It will not be a duplex or a multi-unit property.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Given the lot size, they're limited.
Thank you.
All right, so are they planning to make, right now it looks like a house that somebody made an office out of. Are they planning to make significant changes to it?
The applicant may be able to answer that question more effectively.
Okay.
Currently, there's no application, and I should clarify.
Okay, so any further questions? So at this point, I guess I will then open public testimony. And the applicant is going to be Bess Weissman. Is that correct? Where's Sima? If I put on my glasses? Yes. So let Bess please come up.
Is there a clicker? Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, Council. I'm Bess Worsima, Studio 3, the architect for 202 University. As Sean mentioned, we have an application to return this piece of property to residential stock and also maintain its landmark and historic status. Just a little bit of information about the project and project data that may help to answer, Mayor Rennie, some of your questions about what could be there, what is there, and what is proposed to essentially be there in terms of size and scope of home. So proposed and allowed in an R1 DLHP is obviously around a 2,163 square foot single family home. And that would be what would be allowed typically. So here's your FAR calcs in case you just want to see the math on what is allowable from a garage and a single family home status. As you know, this property is surrounded by what looks like and is a lot of single family homes. Here's just a collection of pictures of the immediate neighborhood showing largely single family homes throughout.
all around. Again, it's just consistent with the neighborhood. This is the current building. It was used as a lawyer's office for a while and is currently being used by a therapist. And it, as you can tell, it looks like an original, beautiful Italianate Victorian home in downtown Los Gatos. And our intent is to, again, keep it as a single-family home and a single-story home on this corner. These are the views. It is a corner home, so, I mean, as you know, it takes even further scrutiny from both a historical and a residential standpoint in any proposal that would be forthcoming. The rear of the house is currently, or rear of the lot is currently a large parking lot, and there's some ADA ramps, redwood ramps, that have been added to accommodate business use. It was transferred to business use in 1978, and the intent is, again, to return it to its single-family status, which I believe is actually consistent with the general plan and zoning ordinances. This is the existing floor plan, and roof plan is on the left, floor plan is on the right. You can actually see that it has a very consistent, for the era of the home, residential floor plan, not office floor plan. There's a couple bedrooms or parlor in the front, a couple bedrooms on the side. There is an existing kitchen and an existing bathroom in the home. These are existing exterior elevations of the project. Sides, rear. This is just a little bit of a sneak peek at what our intent is to propose for a future project on this home, to keep it in its Italianate Victorian character, keep it as a single-family home with a detached garage. Do you have any questions?
I have so I'll go ahead and ask the first question. On the slide before last, you showed a wall to the right of the driveway. Is that the next house, or is that part of a yard? So on the right side of that wall?
It's an existing CMU block wall that is currently there.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, I got it. No use looking that way. Yeah, Councilmember, Vice Mayor Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Based on your proposed concept here, it looks like you're keeping kind of the existing footprint, the existing theme. It looks like you're adding kind of a turret feature there. Is that, I see there's an existing area there that already looks like there could have been one at one time. Were you planning on digging a basement under the house and adding square footage? Are you adding square footage to the house? Are you?
The existing home has a cellar that is consistent with old cellar and new basement definitions and hopeful policy down the road here. The intent is not to put a full basement under the house, but to maintain the current cellar and an additive cellar portion under the area of addition only.
Follow up, go ahead.
And this may be preliminary, but were you planning on adding like a second floor to the home or anything like that?
We're currently not, but I would like to express that this is an application for a general plan amendment and zoning change and not a residential design application.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from my left? Okay, seeing none, thank you. All right, thank you, Bess. So I do not have, so it is a public hearing. I do not have any other cards. Would anybody else from the public wish to address us on this one? Okay, seeing none. Technically, the applicant gets a 5-minute rebuttal to nothing. Would you like any further time? No? Okay, so I'll close the public testimony and come back to council for questions, a motion. Councilmember Jensen.
I'm going to make a motion, keeping in mind, as the applicant pointed out, that the only thing that we're considering tonight is whether to change the zone, and that any architecture and site application is going to come back to the Planning Commission and us, or maybe not us, for further review. So my motion is that we adopt a resolution, which is attachment 7, approving a general plan amendment change from office professional to medium density residential, and introduce an ordinance attachment 8 affecting that zone change. And I would make the findings that are contained on page 4 of our staff report regarding consistency with the general plan, and they're basically all consistency with the general plan. So I would make those findings and adopt in making the motion.
Okay, I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? Seeing no interest, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, passes.
Since that was an introduction of an ordinance also, we need to do that by title only. So if we could add to that the title only.
Okay.
And have
So it
clerk-
passes with all present. And that you need that added to the motion? Or
Yes,
so it's
I have to move to read the ordinance by title only. So
Correct.
moved.
second. And should we call the question again on that? Or is that's adequate? Okay. So then if the clerk could read the title, please.
Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending the zoning code from OLHP office with a landmark and historic property overlay to R1D LHP single-family residential downtown with a landmark and historic property overlay for property located at 202 University Avenue.
All right, thank you. So with that, I should be able to close item 18 and move on and ask the staff to call back the other council members. Then I have to keep looking to the right now. Hopefully it didn't get too comfortable. Well, we can go ahead and get started. So this is public hearing on item number 19, 26 Alpine Avenue Architecture and Site Application. And we'll start with staff, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The item in front of you tonight is the appeal of a Planning Commission denial. The project is a proposal to construct a new single-family home on vacant property. Planning Commission reviewed the subject property in July of 2017. The Planning Commission expressed concerns regarding the siting of the home outside the least restrictive development area, grading quantities, the depth of proposed cuts, and the size of the proposed cellar. Based on these concerns, the Planning Commission voted to deny the application with a 4-2 vote. The applicant appealed this decision on August 7th, based on finding 2 that there is new information that was not reasonably available at the time of the Planning Commission hearing. A supplemental letter from the applicant providing additional information related to the appeal was included as attachment 6 of your packet this evening. A revised letter was then submitted by the applicant and is provided as attachment 12 of the desk item report before you this evening. A letter of support for the project from an adjacent neighbor, a revised landscape sheet, and a timeline of neighborhood outreach provided by the property owner were all also included in the desk item. This concludes staff's presentation, but we are happy to assist the council with any questions, along with staff from Parks and Public Works.
Okay, any questions for staff at this time? Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can read my chicken scratching here. Going back to what the Planning Commission was saying, Commissioner Birch was looking for a geotechnical report. Is there such a thing? Was there such a thing? Is there now?
A geotechnical report was done from the applicant and peer-reviewed by the town's consultant and found to be adequate. I think Commissioner Birch was alluding to additional geotechnical report done by the applicant, and they can speak to if they had done so. Staff didn't receive any additional geotechnical information.
Do you know from your being at the meeting specifically what aspect of geotechnical information Commissioner Birch was looking to?
It was in reference to an adjacent neighbor's concern over the proposed depth of cuts and impacts to their property.
Was it to the tree or just generally?
To the tree and to their property in general.
And then the subdivision occurred in the 1990s, and then we adopted the cellar ordinance in 2002. Prior to the adoption of the cellar ordinance, had the property been developed with the basement, would the basement have been included in the square footage in the FAR? Well, let's say square footage.
the director can follow up on this, but staff's perspective and how it was treated in previous applications applied for this lot is that the condition from 1991 didn't disclude an applicant or a property owner from including a cellar and that being counted against the 2,500 square feet.
Being counted against the 2,500. Okay, that's all I have for now.
Okay, further questions for staff? Okay, so seeing none, at this point, we'll invite the applicant up. I don't think I have the applicant's card, but if you could introduce yourself, you have 10 minutes.
Hi, Toby Corey, owner of 26 Alpine Avenue, 25-year resident of Los Gatos. Thanks for everyone's time this evening. I appreciate Town Council hearing our appeal. Let me open up with my understanding that this project meets every code, standards, policies, and guidelines. It had the full support of the town's planning staff and expert consultants and was supported by the Planning Commission Chairman Thomas O'Donnell. There were a few legitimate issues that were raised at the Town Planning Commission hearing that we want to present and clarify today. Most notably addressing the lack of neighborhood outreach prior to the Planning Commission meeting in June. Since that time, we fully rectified this problem. I reached out to 37 neighbors, and as a result, I met with the most impacted neighbor, 40-year-plus Los Gatos neighbor Diane Cronk, who has 40-year Diane Cronk, who had previous concerns. Diane Cronk, as you know, was the adjacent neighbor when the property was subdivided, and she was a longtime planning commissioner and the most impacted neighbor. I'm pleased to report that Diane, Michael, and Jillian Cronk, along with 5 other neighbors, now support this project as a result of our neighborhood outreach activities. Second, there were concerns raised over oak tree number 9 to address the neighbors' concerns about the stability and continued health of the tree. We hired a second expert who rendered a written opinion after digging a 3-foot deep by 30-foot trench that showed no substantial root structure and that this project would not compromise the tree. The town arborist also peer-reviewed the trench on site. We have Michael Young here tonight to answer any of your questions, the expert arborist. Third, I want to provide some color regarding the extensive design and iteration process we went through that Tom Sloan will talk more about in detail. Our goals of the project were to design a home that was less than 2,000 floor area ratio, although the lot calculations support a 2,600 floor area ratio home. Locate the home as far away as possible from the Cronk property, reasonably protect the views of 38 Alpine Avenue, retain as much of the natural beauty of the property as possible, fit within a neighborhood streetscape, and as a result, the design team checked every box, had planning staff support, created a home that was 1,993 floor area ratio, and 7 of the 9 homes in the neighborhood are larger. In conclusion, we do not feel it's fair to remand us back to the Planning Commission. This project checks every box and meets every requirement. I'm confident that this body will make a fair decision based on the facts, our extensive neighborhood outreach program, Tom's presentation, and any follow-up Q&A. We want to thank the city for giving direction in a meaningful way and giving us an opportunity to get this project approved. Thank you for your time. I'll invite up Tom Sloan.
They still have 10 minutes to finish. We'll come back to him so that you're still giving him 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Please
So,
continue.
Good evening, council members. My name is Tom Sloan. And like Toby said, we did meet all the zoning code requirements for height, setbacks, floor area, site coverage. I'm told, that we meet the residential design guidelines intents, and there is portions of the hillside design standards and guidelines that we also meet. My understanding is the reason why we're here, went before the Planning Commission, is because the average slope of the site is over 30% of a slope. And that causes us to go away from the standard rules and into a discretionary review. So let's not. Okay, so anyway, the first thing that I wanted to do before I started designing this house is take a look at the unsuccessful projects from the past. And it was clear from looking at the previous plans and reading the derogatory comments that we indeed needed to think differently, completely differently. And so a 30% slope may be challenging and perhaps intimidating to some, but I was willing to take the challenge and proceed to determine where the LRDA for locating the development on the site. This slide highlights the area on the site with less than 30% slope in the dark green area. The lighter green indicates tree canopy. You can also see a seasonal stream that flows along Jackson Avenue there. Most of the area within the building setbacks has a slope less than 30 feet, but when the setbacks are subtracted, as this slide shows, the 30% slope shrinks quite a bit. Applying all the zoning environmental restrictions to the site, such as there's a biotic setback from that stream and a geologic setback from a small trace fault line, nearly 70% of the site becomes off limits. The lower area of the site has the steepest portion on the site and more abundant tree canopy, whereas the upper contains a more mild slope. This next slide illustrates one of the, in the dark green, the effect of a two-story massing that would be placed on that upper area where a slope, which has a slope of less than 30%. Although this location, is where you really want to try to put the home, the results would be rather tragic to the neighbor at 38 Alpine, which is up above, causing a lot of view blockage. The next slide shows what happens when the resident or when the resident cuts minimally into the hillside. A home on stilts could reduce the height of the retaining wall. However, the results in blocking the neighbor's view would create overall height exceeding the allowable overall height limit, and the hillside design standards and guidelines do not permit building on stilts. It's also quite a fire hazard. The proposed development is contained within the LRDA, as you can see here, and has been designed to mitigate the environmental and neighborhood impacts by providing a reasonable size home that meets the owner's special requirements. One of those requirements is providing solar connectivity for the site. The northern-facing slope has an abundance of tree canopy, and it was going to be a very challenging thing to do so. The home is designed with a light well on the uphill portion on the south side and will be the primary source of light for the home. The sunlight provides the owners with numerous environmental benefits that one needs to sustain a healthy life. Windows and balconies have been oriented to direct away from the neighbors on 27 Jackson down below. That green area there is an eco-green roof that is put on. It's a flat roof. It's deployed to present the neighbors located above at 28 Alpine or 38 Alpine with an enjoyable view when looking down on top of the roof. This section illustrates how the neighbors up above, the Geiselmans, can see over the top of the vegetated roof. This here is a view from of 38 Alpine with the story poles on the right. You can plainly see that the neighbors up above look right over the top of the story pole, the orange story poles below. Privacy concerns. These are neighbors' photographs that they provided me. The red line represents there's a fence there that's hard to see because of the background, but you can see that the orange is below, and they've already started to plant shrubs. This was a rendering that I provided the Geiselmans over a year ago. This illustrates the test trench that was above the site. In the circle there is the root zone, and virtually no roots were discovered in the trench, the arborist here is here today if you have any questions for him. We also did some mitigation for the neighbor below by planting a tree and some shrubs, and that's what prompted the Kronks to really like this project. The town's consulting architect noted, while the architecture style is different from others in the immediate neighborhood, the scale of the home related to Alpine and other nearby homes would be complementary to the streetscape. Furthermore, Mr. Cannon adds that the proposed home is contemporary in architecture style and is very well designed with a great deal of articulation and detail appropriate to its style.
Thank you.
So that concludes.
Let me see if you have questions. So Councilmember Jensen, you can ask questions of either of the two speakers.
Thank you. My question is, the trench and the arborist report, was that done following the Planning Commission? Was that post-Planning Commission?
Yes, it was.
It is new information?
Yes, it was. That is new information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Mr. Sloan, there's 2 stone columns at the property existing. Are those going to remain?
Absolutely, and the wing walls that branch off of them will remain as well.
So those are of historic nature?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for Mr. Sloan. I didn't quite understand. Are you saying that as currently designed, the home is within the LRDA?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on your alternate A and B, on those drawings, was that keeping the house at the square footage that it currently has?
Well, what we did there is try to illustrate what happens when you, there were 2 different ones. If we lift the house out of the ground to reduce the retaining wall height, the slope of the site is so steep, and we really only have a 1-room wide home that runs parallel to the contours, and so you're pulling it out of the ground rather than benching it into the hillside. It should be noted that there's less than 100, I believe it's around 80 cubic yards of total earth movement, grading quantities, cut and fill, for this entire project. The excavation that happens within the footprint of the building, similar to most houses that have cellars, basements, or crawl spaces. And that's not considered as grading quantities by the way the town measures it. They want to preserve the perimeter in its most natural state. That's the real goal of, building on a hillside, to essentially create a house that seems to grow out of the ground. And so putting it on stilts is not safe. And then the other example showed putting a house, 2-story home, on that one small area of about 1,100 square feet of slope that's less than 30%. That goes sky high and blocks the neighbor's view, and is going to be awful to the streetscape.
Okay, thank you. I guess I didn't phrase my question appropriately. Looking at your Exhibit A and B, you're trying to show how different designs, different placement would impact the neighbors, et cetera.
Yes.
But when you did those 2 examples, A and B, were you using the same square footage as the subject home, or were you considering a smaller square footage?
We didn't develop full plans because right off the bat it was a non-starter for us, because we knew what, very intuitively, been doing this over 30 years, we know that that's not going to work. So it's hard to answer your question because we did not design a home on stilts. because
I
it's a
understand.
non-starter.
There's one
Yeah.
on stilts, and you don't know the square footage of that one. What about the one that's not on stilts?
That would be, if it was only on that one area, it would probably be an 1,100 square foot home.
All right, thank you.
Okay, further questions? Let me ask one, possibly for you or for the previous speaker. The previous speaker talked about you made changes to make the Kronks and other neighbors happy. What kind of changes were those?
Well, I think prior to that, we really didn't have a successful outreach to the neighbors. This was noted at the Planning Commission as well. There's reasons for that, which maybe I can have Mr. Corey discuss. But what we did is we sat down with them and really were able to explain the design very well. And then we worked back and forth on plantings that would screen their view. We really had to, kind of explain how the shrubs would create a foreground and block, kind of mitigate the visual impact of our project.
So most of their issue was then visual, and so you really didn't change anything other than plantings and education.
Yeah, in education, which was a really big thing. I think when people, when you don't have that outreach, it causes people to sort of think they don't matter. So,
okay, thank you. Any further? If you could come to the mic so people watching at home, our large audience at home, will hear also.
The biggest issue is really explaining the challenges of the site, and more importantly, the options of either building a two-story home, which would, as Tom showed, even a 2,000 or 1,500 square foot home would be quite large, versus using the natural contours of the landscape, being able to tuck it in there. We're preserving over 80% of the trees. The rest of the site will maintain its native look and feel. And having had a chance, obviously, to talk to Diane, who is the most impacted neighbor and had the most history with this property, and she ultimately agreed that we took the right approach. We were very thoughtful in that, agreed to some plantings as well, and she thought it was the best home design, as did Thomas O'Donnell, the Planning Commissioner Chair.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will thank you, and you'll get five minutes opportunity at the end. So next up, we will go with Krista Geiselman.
Yes, it's me. This is who they've been talking about. My name is Krista Gieselman. I live at 38 Alpine Avenue next door. I hope you read all of the certified arborists and certified geotechnical people that I hired, because my family is living next door and my children are living next door. They are so concerned about the safety of my family. If you read those, you will understand why I'm standing here and why so many people are here supporting us. We have so many questions. I have never met with the Coreys. They have reached out, and we've been trying, and we've asked them for 2 years, please answer some questions. Nothing. Never any concrete answers. Here are some things that I talked to my certified arborist and my certified geotechnical. Since there is a significant threat to the slope failure, because they are concerned, and so is our lawyer, that our house is going to be damaged, how is this going to be addressed if our home is damaged? How will the retaining wall be constructed? No one's ever answered that. How will the test trench be dug? How deep will the retaining wall? We have questions and questions and questions and questions. Nobody over here has answered any of these questions I've been asking for 2 years. How can we confirm there are no tiebacks? It has it in their plans that they have tiebacks. We've asked them, can you confirm that there are going to be no tiebacks? Finally, Jocelyn got a note from them, because I've been complaining and yelling so much I wanted to have proof of no tiebacks. 3 weeks ago, they gave proof, we have no tiebacks. I've never seen that. I've never seen anything. They have not hired certified arborists. They have not hired certified, at least I have not seen that, because nobody's showing me anything. It's also been brought to our attention that the Coreys are asking to sell the property. They have offered to sell the property to us. If they sell, since they're telling us that they have somebody else ready to buy the property, if they are doing that, can you guarantee that these people that are going to buy the property are going to follow your rules and regulations, that the property, that the people, the commission has said no, and if you do let this go through, are they going to be able to follow it too? My house is in, there could be cracks in the walls, there could be cracks in the foundation, this tree could fall on my 10-year-old daughter's bedroom. This is what people are saying in these letters that you see in front of you. If this does go through and you do change it, please, please, please consider this. They need to have somebody come over, and I need to have a certified arborist of our choice prune that tree so it does not fall. And I need somebody to look at it and look at the trench and look at everything, because they just keep on going, oh, we're going to do that. They do everything afterwards. Like you asked, you said, when did you do it? After I brought it to their attention. This is what's concerning me. Thank you for the safety of my family.
Okay, let's see if you have any questions. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Take a deep breath.
I know, I'm so sorry. I will.
So my question is, I was under the impression from the materials I have read, and we do have all the materials from everybody and from the Planning Commission. Now, having said that, I was under the impression from the materials I read that the applicant had reached out to talk with you. Is that accurate?
All they said was, we know that you have concerns. Would you like to meet? We write back saying, if there have been any changes and you can address our concerns, we will meet. End of conversation.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. So next up I have John Geiselman.
Good evening. Thanks for the time tonight. I'll take a deep breath in advance. It seems to me I'm not going to be able to articulate the technicalities that we talked through and witnessed during the Planning Commission, but it seems it all stems from the amount of cut that's being taken away. That has an impact on the tree that we're very concerned about. It has a direct relationship to the hillside. That has a relationship with the fact that we don't want to have tiebacks underneath our property. It all comes down from trying to build a house the size that they want, which I can appreciate. But to your question, you could accommodate some of the changes that the commission was looking for by eliminating the square footage that's coming from the basement, which results from the amount of cut that comes from the hillside. So to answer your question, there were two questions related to, have the plans materially changed since they were at the commission? They haven't. I mean, there has been some outreach, and we've talked about it, but the fundamental issue is we just don't agree with the current plans as they're set forth right now. And lastly, I just wanted to reiterate the point my wife made, the last one. I think it's great that we've been offered to purchase the land. That just raises additional concerns that, are trying to be sensitive to all the issues that the commission brought up. We debated it or talked it through for 2 hours. If now someone else is going to come in and develop the property, how are all of those concerns going to be addressed and adhered to? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Spector has a question for you.
Yes. What if you had you were got of the planning department, and what is it that you want differently than you think the applicant currently has?
Comes down to the amount of cut that's being taken out of the hillside. That seems to have a cascading effect on all the concerns. It creates the concerns around the tree. It creates the concerns that our geotechnical person brought up around the stability of the hillside. It causes the hillside to have to be structurally made sound after that. It's not the right technical term, but you have to shore it up. If the amount of cut was reduced, it seems to eliminate many of the concerns that have been brought up, not just by us, but by the commission.
Is your concern about the amount of cut something that I'm assuming you're a layperson when it comes to this kind of thing, that you as a layperson are concerned about? Or is the amount of cut something that a professional has indicated is a problem?
Both. Both our geotechnical person, a fellow neighbor who used to sit on the planning commission has the same concerns. The commissioners on the planning commission brought up the same concern. It all seems to stem around just the sheer amount of dirt being taken out of the property to accommodate the square footage that's below ground.
All right, thank you.
Okay, further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Would anybody else wish to address us on this item? I don't have any more cards. Don't see anybody rushing forward. So at this point, I will give the applicant 5 minutes to rebut or give us any final words.
Let me start first. So let me just address some of that that they brought up. I think everything is laid out in the letter that I sent the desk. We had extensive outreach. I sent emails to the Gieselmans repeatedly. October 23rd, it was unanswered. November 10th, it was unanswered. Highlighted some of the inaccuracies in the geoforensic report that they'd done. They'd looked at the prior project. We've bent over backwards to do everything humanly possible. It is true that we did offer to potentially sell the property. Unfortunately, we're going through a very serious health issue with my wife. We hope that we will see the other side of this. Right now, it's scary and occupying quite a bit of our time right now. That was the only reason. We do intend to move forward, but with this type of health issue, it's extremely serious, and we are getting scans every 3 months and monitoring that very closely. Our intent is to build our dream house there. We've worked hard to comply and have reached out. I think that I detailed that in the letter, as Tom also detailed in his letter regarding their geotech report. Tom?
Yeah, I simply want to say that, I'm not blind to the fact that this is an incredibly difficult site, but it is a buildable site, and I don't think council or anybody can say that it can't be built on. We have here our professional arborist, Mr. Michael Young, and I'd like him to address the issue with the tree very briefly. And we also have our licensed geologist or geotechnical engineer. He will tell you that putting in the retaining walls that we're putting in, plus all the shoring, will stabilize the hill and make it better than it would be in its natural state. That's in the reports that he's prepared. The Geiselmans had a report done by Dan Dykman. When you read carefully his report, you can see right through it. He wasn't looking at our plans. He was addressing the previous poor project design. It discusses how we're excavating out and filling mass quantities of soil, which we're not. We have an entire cut for our driveway of 6 inches. A fill of 6 inches and a cut of 1 foot. It's virtually flat. We're just coming right in off of the street. We have no tiebacks. We never had tiebacks. Their report by their geotechnical engineer claims that we do. We've never had them. I don't know where they're coming up with this information. Because I think it's the previous project from about 5-10 years ago. John Geiselman talked about his biggest concern is everything is related to how much cut that we're doing. Again, this cut is within the building footprint. It'll be invisible. You won't see it. It's not going to impact the tree. We have an arborist that has submitted a letter that makes that very clear. We're going to be very careful when we build this project. We don't want it to cave in. Putting in stitch piers is going to really make it happen for us. I've got a minute. The point I'm trying to make is if you remove the area that's the cellar, then you're floating, the house floats out of the ground. If you just do a one-story home and you push it down onto the site, the gradient of the hill is it's just not going to work. I'm sorry. And we've really designed a great house. I consider this to be my opus of my hundreds and hundreds of homes that I've designed, many of them here in the town. It was somewhat of a challenge, and everybody that's reviewed the project has given it a thumbs up except for the neighbors. So thank you.
Okay, let's see if you have questions. Councilmember questions? I do have, go ahead, Councilmember.
Actually, I'd like
Sayak.
to ask questions of the arborist if.
Yep, please have the arborist come up.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I think protocol is we ask you to state your name for the record.
My name is Michael Young. I'm the owner of Urban Tree Management, and I've been a certified arborist for 25 years plus.
Okay, thank you. So you've heard the discussion, and I'm sure you've read the various supporting documentation of the appeal from the appeal period. What are your comments reading the certified arborist for the neighbors' comments against this project? There's a tree, and there's differing interpretations of the health of the tree after this project is built.
So your question is what?
Have you read the neighbor's arborist report?
I have not.
You have not, okay.
Seen it.
Okay, but in your opinion, having done especially the trench, you believe, in your professional opinion, that there is no harm to the tree?
Correct. Yeah, not from this project. I think that the tree is not in great health right now. It has not been well tended, it doesn't seem like, or I don't know what the history of it is, but when I look at it, it isn't in great health. So that creates even more, it raises flags for me as an arborist that there's a project also on the books for near this tree. So my immediate reaction was, well, let's dig a trench and see what our impacts are going to be on this tree. And once we dug the trench, we realized that there were no roots in the trench, so that the impacts that are proposed with this project will have there's no way they can impact the tree.
If I may continue?
Please continue.
So the second question is, hearing the concerns of just the longevity of the tree, what are some ideas and or recommendations you have to preserve its health, and if it's unfeasible, to make sure that it does not fall on their daughter's room?
Well, so again, I can speak to the project's impacts to the tree, which I would say are none, because there's no roots that are going to be affected by the cut. So there's things that the homeowner can do to improve the health of their tree. They could spray the tree. I wouldn't prune the tree. They could do soil work. My guess is that this neighbor would probably, help with that on his side of the fence. I can't speak for him, but it doesn't seem like he's opposed to the tree. So there are things that can be done to improve the health of the tree, but my specific task was to look at the impacts from this project to the tree, and I would say that they are none.
Okay. Any other questions? I would like, thank you. I think I'd like to ask the architect question. Again, so I think you mentioned removing the basement. What if we just reduce the size of the basement? How would that reduce the size of the cut? And remind me, is the basement about 1,200 square feet?
I'd have to double check. This sounds about right. Yeah. This home was really designed to provide a basic, if you look at the floor plan, the main level, there's an entry, there's a kitchen open to a great room, and that's the main space. There's a master bedroom, which is sitting all by itself without any square footage underneath it. And then there's an office with an office that could be used as a bedroom and a bathroom, with a garage underneath it. And so you take the living space, and then you remove the cellar area below that. You're going to either need to shrink the main living space, the kitchen and great room, and make it smaller. It's not very big. There's no grand dining rooms and all these other sort of formal spaces. So that's what makes it very difficult, because if we shrink the building, which was brought up at the tail end of the Planning Commission hearing, they said, will that make it any better? Well, I contend that by the regulations that are set forth that we designed to, that we're not overgrading. Are we excavating? Yes, but that square footage below, shrinking that, would have the same effect would have to occur above it, because you're not allowed to cantilever, large areas without, and that's what would happen. You'd have this shifting away of the basement, and it's really not going to result in less cut. I don't know.
Okay, I think I'm picturing that.
Okay,
trying to follow all that.
This is a highly complex project in the hillside. It's obviously very. It's somewhat hard to explain here at a podium. What happens. But that's essentially what would happen. That's why I don't go around and say, no, I can't do things. I have a very, I can do it. I can make it happen. If I thought that I could tweak it, we would have tweaked it. We've already done a lot of tweaking actually during the process to bring down the grading quantities by sliding the garage all the way forward on the lot. And that saved about 250 cubic yards. So,
okay.
We just don't, this is a very, essentially it's a home that has an FAR of less than 2,000 square feet. That's what my clients directed me to design, a home with a smaller FAR, when 2,600 plus is the allowable.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Leonardis has a question.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Mr. Sloan and perhaps Mr. Corey can come forward to answer this question. Obviously, the Geiselmans have a disparity of opinion about things. Normally, we hear things like, my privacy is being violated, the house is too big, too much bulk, too much mass, et cetera, et cetera. But their concerns primarily have to do with safety or what could happen to their house because there's a lot of grading going on. They mentioned that they didn't really have much communication with you throughout this process. You mentioned that you try to reach out to them. Have you had any meeting with them in person to try to go over some of your differences about this project?
No, but I did do extensive outreach. As I said, there's countless emails. I've submitted a summary of that report to this group. October 23rd, reached out to try and meet to go over these issues. Would have loved to have done that. No response to that email. Again, it's submitted to you, and then again on November 10th, submitted wanting to reach and sit down, have a similar dialogue like we had with Diane Cronk, who, as I said, I think is the most impacted neighbor here, who has all of the history with this property, full-throatedly supported this project and asked this group to approve that going forward. As I said, with a property that's below grade, below the grade of the hillside, it's well below the fence line with a green roof. We used to live next door at their home for 15 years. We're 25-year residents here of Los Gatos. We know that that property and worked really hard. We actually put the fence in, planted pittosporum up the entire length, and worked very diligently to try and address all of the neighborhood issues. And I said we reached out. I detailed that in a report. I can only do so much as extend, and try and meet with them. And as I said, it's documented in that report. I have the emails.
So a year ago, prior to coming to, prior 7 months prior to the Planning Commission hearing, I did meet with John Gauselman for the better part of an hour at our general contractor's office. We just poured through the plans and tried to explain what was going on. The concerns at that point, if I recall, were view impacts, and concern with can you lower the chimneys down? Well, the chimneys are as low as they will meet code. They have to pop up above the roof plane. That's just a requirement, and they don't ventilate properly. But they are all well below the roof. The roof of the project is well below the the lowest floor of their home, and it's even below along the property line. So I didn't really see view impacts based on that meeting. Later, we can address this building going in with the retaining walls is shoring up an otherwise potential landslide. So the building going up, and the statement is in the report, it's shoring the hillside, if you will.
Yeah, as I said, I would add, I would invite you to invite Mr. Pollock up, the longtime geotechnical engineer. He was the engineer with the previous owner. We also were working with that owner when he was submitting for a permit back in 2009. I'll also note it was a much larger home with large retaining walls. We supported that project and came in with a much smaller footprint home, much safer look. So he's had deep experience with this property. We jumped through every hoop that the town left us. No stone was unturned. Deep, extensive reports. It was peer reviewed by the town engineer as well. So I am very concerned. I'm also 100% confident. Homes have been built that have been much more complex than this, that we will ensure 100% safety. As I said, we lived in that property for 15 years. And ask you to invite Robert up if you'd like.
Go ahead, Councilmember Leonaris.
Yes, if you could get the geotechnical engineer up here.
Do you have a specific question for him? Get him started.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rennie. So, obviously the neighbors had concerns that if this were graded, that something could fall on their 10-year-old daughter's head. And of course, I just heard from the architect about it will actually be stronger if you put retaining walls and such in there. Could you comment?
Well, soil tends not to stand steeper than 2 to 1 for any great length of time unless it's supported, and the retaining walls would be supporting it, and right now it is steeper than 2 to 1. So over a period of time, one would expect that the slope will unravel, which it's already done at least once in the past. Putting in retaining walls will stop that. The retaining walls will be supported on piers, so the entire hillside will be much stronger.
Please go ahead.
So just to follow up, we have your geotechnical report, and then Geiselman's have a report as well.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to look at the
did.
Okay. And could you comment on that report and the discrepancies between that report and your report?
That report didn't describe this project. That report described a different project on this property. And even for the different project, the final line in that report was that the project is probably feasible without a problem. And I would say it's 100% feasible without a problem.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, any, Councilmember Spector, you have a question for one of the applicants?
One of the applicants, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, one of the applicants, let's see, why don't you all three come up, please?
Okay.
Yes, those three. Because I actually don't know which of you would be answering it. I'm looking at generally, I'm not, a science person. So I'm looking generically at the issues of cut, excavation, grading, just generically those issues. Is the square footage of the home, does that impact the excavation, cut, grading, or not?
I would have to say that in the garage, in the lower floor, and portions of the where the master bedroom is, where it's almost below grade, if that bedroom were to become smaller, that's going to create less excavation. The quantities will drop. Does that answer your question, I hope?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, then okay, go ahead,
Okay,
Councilmember
two
Sack.
more, and it's general, so the three of you can stay there. The first, with regard to tiebacks, there still seems to be some ambiguity. Will there be tiebacks, yes or no?
No.
Okay,
There will not be tiebacks. That system is, we're going to do a more robust system of shoring using drilled piers, probably a stitch pier. We need to get approved, and then we'll hire a structural engineer who will completely design the shoring system. And it will be coordinated with myself, geotechnical, and it'll be peer reviewed. It's going to have a half dozen plus professionals overlooking it.
Okay, and then with regard to the tree again. Now, I appreciate the arborist comments about the trench and the roots not being there, but Mr. Sloan, if you've followed previous projects, we're always concerned that a tree, regardless of roots being cut, could be impacted by construction. And so oftentimes in hillside homes, we will have conditions of approval where an arborist will be on site to monitor. Well, first of all, we'll make recommendations to ensure the health and make sure that those recommendations are being followed throughout the construction. And oftentimes we'll have restrictions on the actual health many years after construction. Would you, as a homeowner, be willing to take on that condition?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, no further questions.
Okay, anybody else? All right, seeing none, thank you. I'll close the public testimony at this point and come back to council to, I guess, start off, see if you have questions for staff. So maybe I'll just ask one. Again, does staff have any concerns about the geotechnical or structural nature, and how do we ensure that sort of during the building process, the hill doesn't collapse?
Kevin Bagley, Engineering. No, staff has no concerns over this. The geotechnical report prepared by the applicant was reviewed by our peer reviewer. Went back and forth several iterations, including some letters that were also peer reviewed by our peer review expert, in which the peer review expert concurred with the applicant that the hillside or the site is developable and the plan is acceptable by him.
So if I could follow on question on that, I heard them say they haven't yet hired the person that's going to do the structural pier design, so you couldn't have reviewed any design yet. So how do we know that that's going to be done well?
As Mr. Sloan mentioned, that once we get past this process, the applicant will be required to resubmit during the building phase, and that resubmittal will be reviewed by our building department and peer reviewed. It's during that stage that we would be reviewing any piers, any elements related to the building to make sure that it conforms to the California Building Code.
And you will also be reviewing during the construction to make sure something's not done wrong that causes the hillside to collapse before they can get their piers in or get the retaining wall in?
We have a town inspector, and there would be conditions of approval to make sure that a geotechnical expert is reviewing the site during construction.
All right, thank you. Okay, any Councilmember Spector?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your question raises another one for staff. And as a council and before as the Planning Commission, we're being asked to approve a project that appears to have hillside grading issues. What I'm hearing you say now is that ultimately it will be another level of people who will be making the final decision, will be making the final determination. How can we as decision makers at this juncture be comfortable given the issues that have been raised?
At this juncture, as I mentioned before, you look to the applicant's professional who has stated that this is a buildable site, this project will work, and then that report was reviewed by our peer consultant who agreed with those findings that at this stage, with the information that is available to us now, that the project doesn't raise any concerns and is buildable.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me try another question. So does the neighbors, the Geismans, have any recourse if cracks start appearing in their building during the construction or some period afterwards?
I believe the town lawyer or attorney could answer that.
Certainly, and there's a wide variety of legal arguments you'd have, but if any damage is called to a neighbor's property based upon the work that they're doing, they'd be responsible for that. There are measures that we could add regarding security or bonding if you need be, but in this case, you know, we've had at this point in time, both the geotech and it was peer reviewed say it is a buildable lot at this time, and no project in this town or any other city requires you to do the engineering structural drawings prior to approval. It's very expensive and not knowing whether you're going to get the approval to build. So at this point in time, the experts have said it's buildable, and now they have to do show, and that's peer reviewed again to show that structurally, whether that's how the drilling is done and how the piers are put in and all of that is proven up. And so in having a geotechnical expert on site is one of the requirements that you can do, and I think that's probably already a condition. But yes, they do have cause of actions if in fact there is damage to their property caused by a neighboring property.
Thank you. Further questions for staff? Councilmember Sack.
So during the Planning Commission hearing, there was some discussion about the construction management plan. There were some concerns from neighbors about where workers' trucks would be placed, and I believe at that hearing there was discussion that, I don't know if it was shared, but that there was a plan at least to put a lot of the trucks and equipment on site on the driveway. Is that something that has been submitted already, or is that something that we can ask with conditions of approval?
So a construction management plan is a standard condition of approval that we include on all applications. And so that's submitted during the building permit stage, and it's then reviewed by building and engineering to make sure that it meets the town's requirements. So we don't have a formal construction management plan from the applicant at this time. At Planning Commission, they described how they thought they could get many of the vehicles on the property, but we don't have anything on the record for this.
Okay. And then the second question, I asked it of the applicant. So with the arborist, the process that we were just discussing with the structural engineer, we could certainly do something similar with the arborist, where the arborist will make a recommendation and the inspector will be on site to ensure that those recommendations are being followed through on a regular basis.
So there is a condition of approval. It's condition number 6, which is also a standard condition that we reference the arborist report for the site and ask the applicant to submit a response memorandum addressing how the project will follow these recommendations. The council could add another condition that an arborist be on site to oversee the wall construction. That's not included in the conditions of approval.
So if you could just remind me, with the arborist report, did it specifically identify measures to try to help keep the tree healthy and or bolster its health?
No, it did not.
And so if that was something we wish to put as a condition of approval, we could do so?
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Looks like Councilmember Sayak's finished, so Councilmember Jensen.
The tree is on the Geiselman's property, correct? We can't condition
It's
this
on a
project.
shared property line.
Shared property line? Okay. But we cannot condition an action by the other neighbor in an approval of this proposal, correct? We can tell the applicant what to do, but not the neighbor. Okay.
That was an off mic yes. Okay, further questions? Councilmember Spector.
It looks like we're heading toward a motion. Do you want us to do our
Yes.
disclosures?
Yes, let's do disclosures, please.
All right, I'll start with, I visited the property. I think the reason that I was responding to the tree question is that is a fascinating tree right there on the property line and the way that it swings back and forth. But I did visit the property.
Okay, Councilmember Sayak.
Similar disclosure, I visited the property and walked around the neighborhood.
So I drove both sides of it on Jackson and on Alpine. I did not actually go on the property. Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. I have looked at this property for a number of years, including the days when it used to be listed for sale, and I am very familiar with it.
Councilmember Jensen.
I've walked by the property on many, many occasions. I have not actually gone onto it.
Okay, so so next, I guess we are looking for a motion. We've asked a lot of questions. Would anybody like to venture a motion? Councilmember Leonardis.
Not ready to venture a motion, but I will try to get a conversation started here. Normally, when we get these kinds of challenging sites, we hear from a whole lot of neighbors, and there are a whole lot of concerns, such as privacy, such as my views, such as it doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood, it's too big, it's bulk and mass, et cetera, et cetera. But what is really being said in a lot of instances is that the use of the land doesn't seem adequate to the people. In this case, we have a very challenging site. I mean, basically, it's like a canyon, as I recall. And probably when this was subdivided back in 1991, they probably should have just subdivided it into 2 lots instead of 3 lots. However, this is a lot. So how do you go about and try to design a house that works? I do not disagree with what was said by the architect. I think it's kind of a marvel of engineering. And I think this type of a home, the way it is situated, is better situated than putting it up in the corner as a 2-story structure. With that said, I realize it presents a lot of challenges. The only difficulty I have this evening is hearing from what the councilman's said and what the appellants have said. There is a discrepancy, and I kind of wish that they were on the same page a little bit more. So that's my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I guess maybe I'll add a few thoughts to it also. And in reading through the Planning Commission minutes, I think I appreciated what Commissioner O'Donnell said, that he has seen many projects come for this project over the years, and that this was, the best one he had seen. I guess that might say it is good enough, but it certainly was the best one he'd seen. When I start thinking about, do you move around somewhere else? I certainly wouldn't want to get it into the stream setback. So this seems like the best place for it. I also prefer to have it sunk into the hillside than sticking up. I don't like the stilts idea, even though they are illegal. I still don't, in our hillside guidelines, I still don't like that. So I definitely appreciate that it's sunk into the hillside. There was quite a few Planning Commission comments about it being a very well-designed house. I think the Planning Commission, ultimately denied it, but they were, I think it was, they were kind of on the border with that. So I think in other words, it was barely denied. So Planning Commissioners were a bit divided on it. The big issue for me is, okay, this looks like the best project you could do on this lot, and if you decide it's a buildable lot, then sure. Was looking for, is there a way, or do we need to improve, sort of the safety and geotechnical design in the way it's built? And I am hearing from our staff and the applicants, designers and geotechnical consultants, that it is doable and safe. So I'm more on the side of accepting the project. I'm waiting to hear if other council members would like to add anything to the conditions of approval to help ensure it further. So those are my comments. Anybody else? Councilmember Jensen.
I'll weigh in and I think what the mayor has heard. I think it looks like a well-designed project in walking that street many times and looking at that hill and looking at the house that sits above it. It struck me as being as unobtrusive as it could possibly be. So my concern was also with engineering and with that magnificent oak tree. And I am satisfied with the report that came out with the hand digging of the trench to make sure that that tree remains healthy. So given that, I think that the design is certainly the best one I've seen, and I saw some on the Planning Commission when I was on the Planning Commission as well. And I think it's the least obtrusive to the neighbors.
I knew we were waiting for Councilmember Sayak to finish looking through her papers. So
Okay,
go ahead.
So I'm going to, I will make some comments. Then I'm going to throw out a question to my fellow council members. The first is, I appreciate the concerns that the Geiselmans have expressed. And so should this be approved, I would put in some conditions of approval that I think I've been questioning. One is that with the structural engineer on site, I think that, but I also would ask that a condition of approval that the structural engineer and or the applicant, either through the architect, be in communication with the neighbor so that they understand what remedies are going to be placed. I think one of the things that we're hearing, there's three issues of concern: the structural stability, the tree, but also the lines of communication have broken down. And so if it's not, if the two neighbors aren't able to do it, I would hope that at least the structural engineer could provide that professional assurance that the measures that will be put in place will be shared with the neighbor and that they will be followed during the entire construction. I would also ask, as another condition of approval, that an arborist report be prepared to look at specifically how to ensure the health of that tree and what are the conditions and measures that would be put in place during construction. Again, I would ask that be shared with the neighbor, especially since it's being shared. I would ask that the construction management plan, that when it does come to PPW, specifically looking at how to take the trucks off the road because it is a narrow street, it's red curbed, and some ideas were shared at the Planning Commission, and I want to make sure that those ideas were followed through in the actual construction management report. Those are the 3 conditions of approval I would put in should this be approved. I'm not quite sure, because it's an appeal, which of the following ways we can follow the process. I don't believe there was an error or abuse of discretion on the Planning Commission. I don't think there was any policy decisions that they did not have discretion over. The new information, was it readily available? I know that some of the commissioners asked for the new information. So I'm just looking to my fellow council members, which of the 3 really is our avenues for looking at this appeal and trying to move this forward?
Okay, thank you. So I'll maybe add a few words of answer. So I read, when I'm reading the Planning Commission minutes, I at least remember Commissioner Birch and maybe 1 or 2 others, and I think there was a couple others saying that, we're really not quite sure here at this point. Let's let the council read what we've talked about and make the decision have them make the decision, which I know is not preferable, but I think the message was from them, they did deny it so that we could also think about it. I know that's not our preference, but I also appreciate that, when they worked it over pretty hard and weren't quite sure, they wanted us to make the decision. So again, where does that fall into the 3 type of findings? I think it falls in the one that we're calling error, but error is a bad word. Maybe the town manager could help me out. We've talked about this before.
It appears that you may have assistance from one of your council members, and then we're also available to help.
Councilmember Jensen wanted to.
I wasn't going to talk about error or omission. I was going to talk about new information. The reason I asked the question of the applicant as to when the trench was dug on the tree was to find out if it was done after the Planning Commission meeting. It was. And I believe it was done due to issues and questions that arose at the Planning Commission. So was it available at the time? Sure, you can always hand dig a trench. But given that there were multiple arborist report, was that a reasonable thing to have considered doing at the time? I would say no. And so given the issues raised at the Planning Commission, there was new information that was provided by that new arborist report. So I think there is new information. And where I would go back to Ms. Sayak is to say, I think that the basis would be that new information given the concerns that were raised. But our policy says that generally it's returned to the Planning Commission, but to the mayor, given the discussion that took place at the Planning Commission, and you're correctly observing that they were really asking the council to weigh in, it doesn't seem appropriate to send it back.
So would Councilmember Sack like to make her motion with that finding?
Sure. Okay. So I make a motion to, let's see. Okay, hold on a second, because let me pull up my applicable information. Okay. Going to make a motion to grant the appeal and approve the project based on the new information that came forward because of the Planning Commission discussion. And I will include 3 conditions of approval. I think I mentioned it earlier, the first being an arborist study done specifically to look at how to ensure the health of the tree and to continue preserving it during construction. The second is with regard to the structural engineer, and I really want to stress that that plan be shared with the neighbors so that as construction occurs, there is constant communication. And I would also include the condition of approval for the construction management plan to ensure that we have an adequate flow and that a lot of the construction trucks are taken off the street and onto the property.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Councilmember Jensen.
Yes, I'll second the motion.
Okay, I have a Councilmember Spector would like to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would almost never say that the Planning Commission did anything wrong, and I don't think they did at this point. We do have some new information, so we can slide ourselves into that part of the ordinance, but I don't think it was so significant that it shouldn't go back to the Planning Commission or that it's a basis for overturning the Planning Commission. Having said that, I agree with the council members who say that I thought the Planning Commission raised a lot of issues and that they were looking for the council to make the final call. And that's what I see us doing now, and I will be supporting the motion. I felt as though there was no clear answer in this one. It was a difficult lot. I agree with maybe Mr. Leonardis, who said it probably should have never been 3 lots. It should have been 2, saying that you can build a 2,500 square foot home there and not considering whether that is a basement, a cellar, or 2 stories high. There were a lot of shortcomings when this property was subdivided. But the bottom line is that I thought that the Planning Commission raised all the appropriate issues. I felt as though they were ultimately looking for the council to make the call, and I believe that this motion has the council making the call and has the council making the call in an appropriate fashion. So that's why I'm supporting the motion.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to ask staff if they have any concerns about, I think they may have some comments about the additional conditions of approval.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a clarification, Lisa Peterson, Town Engineer, that there is a condition number 59 that does talk about observation by soils engineer, geotechnical engineer. Typically it would be a geotechnical engineer who would do the observation on site. And there could be something added to that regarding sharing the information with the neighbors, but I just did want to highlight that for the council. So if that maybe also addresses some concerns. Thank you.
So, Councilmember Sayak, are you?
And that's
okay
I'm going to leave it to the experts to decide which expert should be on site to ensure that this remains as safe a project as possible.
Okay, so I don't think that's a change to the motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. Thank you. So at this point, our last agenda item is actually going to be for the Town Pension and OPEB Trust Oversight Committee. So I'm going to adjourn the Town Council meeting and give us a 7-minute break and before we call to order the OPEB Trust Oversight Committee. So let's come to order. I guess we're going to call to order the Town Pension and OPEB Trust Oversight Committee. So I'm going to need a new roll call since it's a new committee or whatever we are.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Councilmember Mariko Sayak. Here. Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Vice Mayor Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Rob Rennie.
Here. All right, so I guess I don't need verbal communications ahead of time, so we'll start with a staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Council. The item before you tonight is another step in a series of steps that this council has taken to address the town's unfunded pension liabilities. Previously, this council has adopted what's referred to as a Section 115 IRS pension trust. You have also hired PARS as the administrator of that trust, and through that engagement, you've also hired U.S. Bank as your custodian and trustee, and through them, you have hired Highmark to be the allocator of the assets that ultimately are deposited into the 115 trust. Highmark Capital offers 5 different asset allocations. The real difference between the allocations is how much of a percentage is in equities and how much of a percentage is in fixed income. The higher percentage to equities, the greater potential for return, but a slightly higher volatility. The lower the percentage to equities, the lower historic return, but a lower volatility. This item came before your Finance Committee twice to deliberate which of the 5 asset allocations was deemed appropriate for any monies deposited into the 115 trust. Your Finance Committee met on October 9th, heard a staff recommendation, asked for additional information. On December 4th, staff provided additional information, and the item was deliberated again. And at the conclusion of those discussions, the Council Finance Committee made a unanimous decision to bring forth a recommendation to deposit any monies into the PARS capital appreciation allocation. That is an allocation with a higher percentage to equities. The conversation centered around the fact that historically there is a premium that is usually paid to equities over fixed income investments over long-term cycles. And they also thought that in doing so, they wanted to do what's referred to as dollar cost averaging, where they didn't want to deposit any amount of money in a single lump sum, because then that gives you a single point of entry risk to the market. Instead, they wanted to deposit monies. In this case, the consent item that you approved earlier recognized $3.3 million to be deposited. And so in this case, they want to deposit roughly $300,000 into this asset allocation each month over a series of 11 months so that they get no single exposure to the market over the course of the following year, but instead get about 11 or 12 different entry points. With that being said, that concludes the staff report. We are available for any questions.
Okay, so questions from council? Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you have this account, which is like 10% of the global account. These monies they sit in an account, and then when are they expended and for what?
Very good question. One of the big discussions that occurred was exactly that. What do we expect in terms of cash flows? Staff had recommended a slightly different allocation because staff is looking into a few other items that we might bring forward that may or may not change the cash flow composite of this trust. But that being said, we also have sufficient other assets. And so the committee thought that there's enough sufficient other assets and that this is only $3.3 million, that they would rather get the equity exposure for the long term, knowing that eventually all of these are long-term assets.
But we would use the money to pay for what?
So the 115 trust has a couple of purposes. One of the purposes could be to just deposit monies, and when enough monies are there and accumulated, you could decide to do a lump sum payment to CalPERS to, either pay down a portion of the unfunded liability or to take a specific unfunded amortization period and pay that single amortization period. Or the monies, conversely, could be used almost like a contribution stabilization fund. Let's say the 5-year forecast shows that we're able to meet all our budgeted expenses related to our pensions, but that's with the assumption that CalPERS meets all their assumptions. If we did have some type of a a market correction, that loss would equate into a higher contribution than was previously anticipated, and these monies could be used to offset that. So that it can be used in several different ways.
And let me just add that it can only be used for pension purposes.
All right, and then you mentioned a lot of people, hired a lot of people, one group, another group. I'm assuming they get paid, and I'm assuming they get paid out of our fund, but why don't you clarify that for me?
Thank you. Another good question, and another one that was highly discussed at the Finance Committee. The recommendation also stipulates that all these monies would be in what's referred to as a passive allocation. Passive allocations are different indexes or mutual funds that try to track broader market indexes, but they do it in the most cost-efficient way. Several of the community members had very strong opinions about the fact that they feel over time there's no real empirical evidence that shows you should be paying managers when you can be investing passively.
So are we paying managers?
In this instance, we are paying the fees associated with our engagement, but we are paying the lowest fees associated with the actual investments because passive management usually has the lowest fees.
And how much is that? X amount of money per what?
If you put all the fees together, it works out to be about 70 basis points.
So what does that mean in terms of money?
In terms of...
I don't know how to put a dollar sign and then say 70 basis point. What's that mean?
In terms of money, on $1 million, I think 70 basis points equates to about $7,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions from council members? Okay, seeing none, I will open the public testimony. I see Angelia Dorner dying to address us.
Angelia Dorner, just, you know, the ad hoc committee meeting yesterday for the parking garage, the likely investors for the equity or for the financing of that are expecting to get anywhere from 15, but more likely 20% on an annual basis. Is it possible, if there was a way to structure a bond, as maybe we talked about before, that could be purchased by the pension fund and may as well reap the 15 to 20% return annually versus paying it to some other pension fund? I don't really know if that would work, but he's the pension man, so,
Okay, so
that's just an idea. It's a great return.
any questions for Ms. Dorner? Seeing none, I'll let staff tell us that pension funds are not allowed to invest in those types of investments, correct?
I wouldn't say they're not allowed. I would say that it has become less and less of a practice for municipalities that have pension obligations to invest in their own projects. One of the reasons is because it's hard as a fiduciary to prove you're not acting in self-interest. And so if the investment were to not pan out, it would be a very difficult conversation to have as a fiduciary. This is often why, you know, when you look at the prudent person role and some of the other roles that's associated with being a fiduciary, you often want a little bit of an arm's length. I'm not saying it's not done, but it is no longer a common practice.
Okay, so any other members of the public wish to address us? Seeing none coming forward, I will close the public testimony. I'd probably, at home, they can't see our full room of people, so I will close the public testimony and come back to council for more questions, motion, discussions. Vice Mayor Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Well, as a member of the Finance Committee, which I am no longer a member, but I was during this meeting when we had these discussions, the citizens in the group felt that because we're required by state law with a lot of our reserves to put them in short-term instruments that only yield a very small, I would like to say risk-free, but largely risk-free proposition, that they wanted to take this money and not put it in anything like CDs or whatever we've been investing in order to gain the most return. They wanted to put this money to work and make that money work hard. Staff had presented us with several options, one being a lot of equities, one being the least amount of equities, and the Finance Committee leaned towards the most equities because they want to get the best return for this money so they can work on paying down the pensions, and that was the logic behind their decision.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Sack.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand. This is an area I know very little about. So is this option that's being presented to us the aggressive of the various options as Councilmember Leonardis just described?
I hesitate to use the word aggressive
Okay.
because a 70% allocation to equities is not out of line with what a lot of other pension plans are doing. It is an allocation that has more equity than some of the other allocations. And so in that regard, just looking at those 5 asset allocations, it has the more aggressive exposure to equities. But I wouldn't necessarily call the allocation itself aggressive.
And then how long does the money sit there not being touched?
So that was part of the conversation also, and this is where staff, kind of hesitated a little. And we talked about this at the meeting, and Vice Mayor Leonardis, characterizes it absolutely correctly. If you look at the city as a whole, it appears as if we actually have very little equity exposure based on all our investments. And so for our purposes, they view this as being a 30-year objective. Our liabilities are a 30-year or longer objective. And so one of the reasons they want a dollar cost average is because they are cognizant of the fact that, we do have markets at higher valuations currently. And so they didn't want a single exposure point. And so that's why they discussed dollar cost averaging, but acknowledging that these monies are going to be there for a long time.
Go ahead.
My final question, I know we have training coming up. Is it training to better understand what you've presented to us today so that as we have future discussions, we'll understand the various asset allocations and know exactly what you mean?
The training you'll be receiving, unfortunately, isn't necessarily investment training.
Okay.
What it is training to better help you understand when you do make an informed decision, and your role as a fiduciary is to just make the best informed decision you can. I believe counsel, if he were here, I've worked with him quite a bit over the years, would think that you've been provided enough information to currently make an informed decision. What he'll expand on during our fiduciary training is just kind of more elements that go along with the fiduciary and how it aligns with California law.
Okay, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To staff, I'm looking at looks like page 6 of 20 of your staff report or of attachment 1, and it has categories of risk from conservative to capital appreciation. I was under the impression that we did moderately conservative. Is that correct or incorrect?
So currently, there are no monies invested in any asset allocation for the Pension 115 Trust. When you look at the bottom section on that page around the OPEB trust, you are currently invested there in one of the CERBT trusts. And that trust, I believe, is the less conservative trust. Is that correct, Finance Director?
It's the strategy. It's the original strategy, which I think was 60-40, 60% equities, 40%.
Right.
So it's not, I wouldn't say it's aggressive. It's typical. It's long-term.
So on the 115 trust, in the consent item that created the budget action earlier, that $3.3 million that had previously been appropriated by this council for pension purposes has now been made available to invest in one of these asset allocations. The deliberation tonight is the referral from the Finance Committee to invest it in the capital appreciation asset allocation.
Which, if I'm looking at this chart, is the most let's say, it's the most aggressive.
Because of the higher percentage to equities, it has a higher expected return, but then it also does have a higher risk profile of when you look at standard deviation.
I get that.
Yeah.
And how much are we putting into this capital appreciation column?
It would be the 3.3 million, but it would be done on a monthly basis at roughly $300,000 a month. And in July 1st, you have also, through your previous budget action, allocated an additional million. And that additional million, we can then discuss at the Finance Committee how they would also like to allocate that million, and then come back to this Oversight Committee.
And this is what the Finance Committee recommended.
The Finance Committee, I would say both of your representative council members were unanimous for this allocation. I would say 2 of the 3 citizen members also concurred with them.
And did staff?
Staff brought a different recommendation, but I would caveat that by saying we brought it not necessarily because we disagree with them. We brought our recommendation because internally we're seeking additional information that made us think these monies, may be used for a different purpose in the 1 to 5 year range, whereas they're looking at it as a 1 to 30 year range. But staff didn't have the additional information. Will probably be going in February, but these monies will only be going in $300,000 at a time. So staff made it clear that we totally, respect that they have the opinion they have and are comfortable supporting that opinion currently on a dollar cost averaging.
$300,000 a month?
Correct.
So in 3 months, it's $1 million.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Sack.
So you mentioned 4 out of the 5 committee members were supportive of this option. If you could just give some context, what was the hesitation of the other committee member?
I don't know if I would call it a hesitation as much as it was probably deferring to staff.
I see. Okay.
The other 4 members had articulated much more why they had, the reasoning and the rationale for their actions. The 1 member, I would say, was more kind of a deferral to staff.
So if I could make some comments at this point, being on the Finance Committee and sitting through a lot of this. If you recall back, the reason we did the 115 trust instead of just dumping it all in CalPERS is to give us some flexibility. As our Assistant Town Manager pointed out, what if there were big losses at some point at CalPERS and all of a sudden our yearly payment goes up a bunch and we don't have a lot of excess budget? Here's a place we can now fill that in. It gives us, it gives us, another option that if we just gave it all to CalPERS, and some people are uncomfortable that CalPERS is really doing that great a job. One thing to remember, CalPERS is assuming a 7.5% return. They are stepping it down to 7 over time, I guess it is. If we choose an option that is expected over the long term to return less than that, we're actually losing ground from if we put it in CalPERS. If we're going to sit there and hold this money and not invest it, or if we're holding the money invested, we should be keeping up with the expected CalPERS return at least would be my argument. The other thing I want to mention a little bit is when you go with equities, if you have a long-term horizon, like you're saying, I'm not going to need this money for 30 years, it has a lot less risk effect because the markets go up and down, and there's a pretty good track record that over time equities return more. If you were going to need your money in 2 or 3 years, as I said, the markets go up and down, there might be a point where the market is down, and so you have a huge risk factor that I need the money now and I'm in the down point of it. Every down point has an up point to it. So if you're really trying to invest for this 30-year liability, you want to go with the best return is kind of the way I'd say I think about it, and a lot of the committee members were thinking about it. Staff didn't recommend it because one of the things that we did was we got a consultant to try to figure out more in detail when are we going to need the cash flow money from our pension plan. You think of it as over a 30-year time frame, but people retire, things change. So, when exactly are we going to need this liability? There hasn't been a good understanding of that. We just know we have this big pension liability that's due sometime over the next 30 years. And I think staff was trying to get a better understanding. And then they were also maybe thinking about, well, are there any other creative things we can do that we would want the money for sooner than that? Did you want to add to that,
I would just
Mr. Andrews?
add, one of the primary differences here, unlike CalPERS, when we invest with CalPERS, they have a single asset allocation, and we are beholden to that allocation. This recommendation, while it's currently for the capital appreciation, that does not preclude this body from at some point thinking, well, maybe we want to go to a different allocation. So that's one of the main advantages of this construct versus CalPERS. It's because you do have options. When this oversight committee was adopted by the town council, yourselves, one of the things in the staff report is that annually you folks will review the asset allocation and see if the allocation still makes sense given the best information you have at the time. So unlike CalPERS, which is a static construct, you get one asset allocation and that's all you get. You do have the ability to have options here, and you do have the ability to change those options when you deem fit.
And if I could add another comment, and I'll let you add your thoughts also. Another feeling that I think all of the committee members had, and we've had, I think Mr. Van Naden and maybe some others at the podium saying, you guys need to get with investing. We're sitting here holding this money at a 1% return. We're falling further behind CalPERS. So everybody, whether they, necessarily agreed on should it be the highest equities or the next highest equities, they all said you've got to get with it now. So I almost feel like there's urgency to approve this and start getting it better than the 1% return. As Mr. Andrews mentioned, we really don't want to just dump it all in now because you don't know if this is a high point in the market for the year. We'd like to put it in over time, and the committee agreed that a year's time was a good way to step it in. I think the PARS representative had said it's typical to step in over 3, or maybe that was part of 3 months over, maybe that was part of the staff report, and the committee decided to actually be more conservative and step it in over a year. Would you like to add anything to that, Mr. Andrews?
Nothing other than what I previously stated, which staff does not have a strong opinion against this recommendation. Staff brought a recommendation based on a series of variables we were looking at. We fully appreciate that in the long term, equities definitely pay a premium over other fixed income assets. We also know that, as I mentioned previously, this is not a static investment. We have other options in the future to shift course if we think that's appropriate at the time. And staff also knows we're going to continue to work on a few other items that we'll bring forward to the Finance Committee, which ultimately may come before either this body or the Town Council, which may or may not beget other conversations. But we're very comfortable with the recommendation, with the information we have, and with the deliberations that took place at the Finance Committee.
Okay, other comments, questions? Motion? Vice Mayor Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Since I see Mr. Conway sitting over here with us this late hour, we have so many millions and millions and millions of dollars in reserves, and the objective is for them never to go below what the investment is. So we have them in CDs or treasury bills or whatever. And again, the Finance Committee looked at this small amount of money relative to what our millions and millions of dollars are in reserves that by state law we're not allowed to take out of those low percentage instruments and convert to equities or anything else, because that would be playing the market with the public's money, which is dedicated to those those funds, those reserves. So in relationship, this is a small amount of money to our overall portfolio. And again, they looked at the returns on from the 5 choices, and they felt we want to go for the highest returns, which is still only like a 70-30 allocation of equities. But they felt like going with the lowest level of return, it was like in the 3 or 4% range, wasn't going to be aggressive enough considering we have so much money sitting in cash already. I hate to use the word aggressive, assertive enough. So they were looking for to better the interests of the people's money by making their choice. And I don't find this to be like a high risk proposition, especially with the dollar cost averaging. I kind of wish we would have started this process a year ago before the market went up 25%. But hopefully with the new tax cuts going through Congress, maybe it'll go up another 25% next year. And we'll be in time for that.
And I would just add, having participated either as a board member or as a CIO for 7 years in board pension deliberations, fiduciary council would be very satisfied with the conversation and the back and forth that's been occurring at this meeting.
Okay, so would you like me to make a motion? As a Finance Committee member, I'll go ahead and make the motion for the staff recommendation, which there's 4 parts. The first one is establish the Town Council as the Oversight Committee for the Town of Los Gatos IRS Section 115 Pension Trust.
I apologize, Mayor.
You don't have to do
You're
that?
reading a previous memo.
Okay, am I reading the wrong one?
Sorry, it's the attachment to the staff memo. Tonight is a single action, and that action would be to make a motion to adopt, if you are going to adopt the Finance Committee recommendation, that would be to adopt the PARS capital appreciation passive asset allocation.
Okay, so I'll make that motion then, which is simpler.
I will second that motion.
Councilmember Spector.
Well, I'll start out by saying thank you, Finance Committee. Thank you, committee members who were involved. I totally want us to increase our pay down of our pensions, and I've been griping about that for years. However, having said that, I am not comfortable as I sit here tonight with the capital appreciation column and recommendation. I'm specifically not comfortable with the 75% equity. So, but I don't want to vote against it, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay, other comments? All right, well, let's call the question and see what we get then. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? None. Any abstentions? Okay, so I think we have 4 ayes and 1 abstention. Councilmember Spector voting abstention. Okay, so does staff need anything else from us?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. So
Congratulations on your first meeting.
we will adjourn then the Town Council, the Town Pension and OPEB Trust Oversight Committee. Thank you.